everybody here?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and I see Mr. Simon is with us.
Good evening, Mr. Santoro. Good to be here. Thank you.
Welcome. Okay, well, do we have any objections to starting?
Here you got 1 minute. Oh, now it's 7:30.
Is that all right then? That's the official bell.
And we're off.
And we're off to the races.
I just mute my phone here. Okay. Okay, this meeting, the Borough of Madison Zoning Board of Adjustment is now called to order. This is the special virtual meeting of March 4th, 2021. Can I get an announcement of notice, please?
Let the minutes reflect that adequate notice of this meeting has provided in the following manner. At a regular meeting held on February 11th, 2021, the board approved a special meeting for March 4th, 2021. On February 12th, a copy of the schedule of this meeting was posted at the bulletin board at the main entrance of the Hartley Dodge Memorial, was sent to the Madison Eagle and Daily Record, and filed with the Borough Clerk, all in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act. In response to the public safety considerations and legal authorization, the Board of Adjustment began conducting its monthly meetings remotely using the Zoom platform. And subsequently, separate notices have been published each month advertising of this change and indicating that the procedures and requirements for monitoring such meetings and for making public comment, along with any explanation of the audio muting function of the electronic communications platform being utilized, is provided with detailed information on how to use Zoom and participate, found on the RoseNet website.
Perfect. Can I get a roll call, please?
Mr. Dianio?
Here.
Mrs. Driscoll?
Here.
Mr. Fitzsimmons?
Here.
Dr. Paetzel?
Here.
Ms. Salco?
Here.
Mr. Santoro?
Here.
Ms. Teratelli?
Here.
Wonderful. Could we get could everybody join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I see Ms. Boardman has the flag. So we're all prepared.
Sure.
Ready? I pledge
I
allegiance
pledge allegiance
to the flag
flag
of the
of the
United
United
States
States
of
of
America
America
and to the
and to the
republic
republic
for which
for
it
which it
stands,
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible.
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I think we did it perfectly. That's all. All right, so minutes for approval. We had just gotten minutes for Feb 25. I'd rather hold off to the next meeting. We'll address that. There's no resolutions for memorialization. Obviously, this is a special meeting for the Madison Movie Development LLC application, which we had started on 1/28/21. Gary, was there anything you wanted to say up front?
No, well, first we should note for the record, I think I already said it, that Mr. Foster and Ms. Carr have both recused on this application. That's why they're not here. And we knew that. That was announced last time. That's nothing new. No, well, the only other thing, I did distribute a little memo. It was really just a reminder for people to think ahead to the next meeting. Based on, I went through the transcripts we gotten from the January 28 meeting, and tried to list everything that during the course of that meeting, people made suggestions, requests, whatever about changes. So it's not for tonight, really, because tonight we're, as I understand, going to hear about architecture and traffic and site plan. We haven't gotten a revised plan yet anyway. So that memo I sent out, and everybody's gotten it, it's been posted. That was just for looking ahead, really. So I think that was the only thing, really. I mean, there was some other, well, I guess there's some email about the from the fire, somebody to the Dennis, and I think that's something else. We should get to that through Dennis, through his testimony at the next meeting as well. That relates to site layout. It's not architecture. So I note that it's there. I think it's been posted now, but it's not really evidential for tonight. It should come in through Mr. Harrington at the next meeting, I suggest. I think that was really all I had. Joe, you mentioned this is a special meeting, but we had announced it would be only for the movie development application, but it's Joy for Overflow Business. We're not charging them for this meeting. And our regular meeting's a week from tonight. We'll just see what goes on at that meeting, where we are. So that's all I have.
Okay, so Mr. Wilson, is that your plan? What would you like to talk about?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Peter Wolfson of Dave Pitney. With me is my colleague Luke Pontier, here on behalf of the applicant. The board will recall, as the chairman indicated, we started this hearing on January 28th. At that time, Mr. Simon, on behalf of Save Madison Theater, raised objections on the record, which we addressed. The board determined to move forward and dismiss those objections. And we followed with testimony from our engineer, Mr. Keller. Following Mr. Keller's testimony, the board and its professionals made several recommendations as to engineering issues. The applicant has been working feverishly since that 28th to find ways to address as many of the issues as we can. It's a bit complicated because, as you'll recall, we're dealing with neighbors as well who share this driveway with us. So the logistics taking a little time. And we also want to come back with a submission that addresses as much as we can all at once, so the board is not getting it piecemeal and we can do it efficiently. So that's the reason that we propose to go to architecture and traffic this evening. Also with us is Paul Phillips, our planner, depending on how we do this evening. Paul is available to speak in support of the relief that we need in connection with the application.
Okay, so then you're going to come back at a future date and wrap up the engineering testimony, answer as many of those items, outstanding items as possible. And then we'll go to the, we'll go for questions from Mr. Simon as well as the public. Is that right?
That would make sense to me. Yes, sir.
So Peter, as of now, you're not aware of any other additional witness, not that you can't have one, but there's no one on deck at the moment.
Yeah, no, I have with me Jeff Gertler, who will lead off on
Right, I
architecture.
understand that.
I have Eric Keller, who will testify as to traffic, and then depending where we are, Paul Phillips is available for planning.
Right, I'm just looking ahead as far as planning.
No, we just,
Contemplate anyone else.
we don't.
Okay, that's fine. Not that you can't change your mind. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a clarification question, please? I'm assuming that at the conclusion of each one of Mr. Wolfson's witnesses this evening, both the architect as well as the traffic consultant, that those witnesses will be made available for cross-examination.
Of course.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're just trying to, recognizing that on the engineering part that they're trying to craft some solutions that are going to be pretty complex, and it's going to take, we got to give some reasonable amount of, give them a reasonable amount of time to get that done. But everybody, you and the members of the public will, of course, have the opportunity to ask questions.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay, Mr. Wilson, why don't you go?
Okay, just one last housekeeping item before I turn it over to Mr. Gertler. One of the issues that Mr. Simon had raised, in addition to objections to various aspects of our legal notice, was a theory that a use variance was precipitated by the sharing of the driveway, which has been in existence for nearly 100 years. If I wasn't clear on the record, we reject that assertion. Our planner will speak to it during his testimony, and we addressed it also in correspondence dated February 26, 21 to the board, which was copied to Mr. Simon, and we would just ask that that letter be put in the record.
I understand it's been posted. It's in the file. I don't think any action's required. I don't think the board has made any judgment that there's a use variance required. Doesn't mean that Mr. Simon can't argue that down the line, but
Thank you, Mr. Hall.
there's no
Okay.
impediment to proceeding in my mind, so.
Okay, very good.
Okay.
Wilson, why don't you proceed then?
Thanks very much. I'd like to call Jeff Gertler, our architect.
Jeff, can you raise your right hand and let's swear you in if we could. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
Jeff, could you just confirm your affiliation with your firm?
Yes, I am a founding principal of Gertler and Wente Architects.
Okay. Can you give us a brief background of your educational and professional experience?
Yes, I have civil engineering degrees and economics degrees from Rutgers University. And then after working for a year with the DOT in New Jersey, I have an architecture degree from City College in New York.
And do you hold professional licenses?
I hold licenses in New Jersey, in New York, in Massachusetts, in Pennsylvania, Florida, Georgia, I think Wyoming still, I'm not sure, but in several states, yeah.
Well, we'll accept him as an expert. He's been before our board before.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jeff, did you prepare the architectural plan submitted to the board last revised November 18, 2020?
Yes, I did.
Okay. I'd ask you to take the board through those plans, as well as addressing some of the comments that we received in some of the review members' memos. Specifically, I think you have some exhibits regarding the size of the proposed building as it fits into the block and the downtown area.
Very good. So if we could, I guess, share right now.
Yeah, okay.
Well, first, good evening, Chairman Santoro, board members and board professionals. Thank you for seeing us tonight. We do appreciate this. When we first began the project, we had, of course, met with the HPC many times. And then when we knew we were going to then meet with the zoning board, Mr. Stern had asked me, how did you come to the design of the building? And we wanted to quickly look at how, or explain to you how we arrived at the design of the building, because it's important to understand its connection to downtown Madison. One of the important things that we looked at was the design guidelines, and those are for implementing the Madison's historic preservation ordinances. And we use them as a jumping off point. One of the things that is very critical, and it's of course in the design guidelines, I'll just read this quickly. Stylistic differences among buildings downtown are worth preserving. There is no, and this is important, there's no one style to which buildings in the downtown ever did or ever should conform. The buildings complement each other by their common scale and materials. Good craftsmanship and clear relationship to the street are just as important as details like brackets or transoms. This is important. All buildings shall be recognized as products of their own time. There is no need to falsely create an earlier historic appearance or introduce historicizing alterations which have no historical basis. This is critical because we, as you'll see, we did not look to design a new building on Lincoln Place to look like another building, to replicate another building, but we thought there was a lot of very strong architectural features in downtown Madison that we thought were important to look at and see if we could use the essence of those strong features in our building. So we'll just take you through what we thought were the most important aspects and then show you how we implemented them into the building.
Jeff, if I might, you are
Yes.
you sharing the screen and you're referring to some PowerPoint slides. Just for the record, perhaps we can mark this as A1.
Okay, would that be
It's
each?
posted on the website?
It is.
Because the first thing said today's date, so I assume you didn't post that 2 days ago.
So some, what we did was we abbreviated some of the slides from the original deck, thinking that we could probably explain the same information with less slides. So that's why the different date.
Okay.
But it's the same information though. The information hasn't changed.
Thank you.
Okay. Size and scale. So this is starting off point. New construction should now conform to the massing, proportions, volume, scale, and height of neighboring buildings. That's critical in good design. And when we look at Lincoln Place, we have an image of it. You can see we did a photo montage taking a picture of each building and tried to put them to the right scale in terms of the spacing between them from Waverly Place over to Prospect. So our dilemma was if we're supposed to match or use Lincoln Place as a jumping off point, we realized that there is virtually no two buildings are the same, no two buildings are the same height, No two buildings have the same materials. As you could tell, it's roughly, or really is a hodgepodge of a design for a street. So what we did was we looked at the downtown Madison more importantly. And we thought that obviously Waverly Place and Main Street were very good as jumping off points. So the first thing we'll talk about is that new construction should be compatible with the rhythm of neighboring buildings along the street. Directional emphasis, whether vertical or horizontal in character of new construction, should relate to that of neighboring buildings. So we looked at the buildings mostly on, of course, Main Street, Waverly Place, and on Lincoln Place. And, you know, most buildings have a very definite rhythm to them vertically, and that is there's this ABA rhythm. Most typically, there's a very strong central character to a building with smaller shoulders on either side that we would call the A on either side of the B. Only on Lincoln Place, you can see that there's actually one building whose center is actually narrower than its shoulders on the right and left. But for the most part, buildings are either stronger in the center, or when they're not, and they're more equal, like at 50 Main Street on the lower left. There's something about the center point, like the gabled roof line, that gives away the center of the building. And you can see our building that we designed on the lower right-hand side takes that same theme, which is we have a strong center point, the B section, and smaller sections, A to either right and the left side. We also looked at this on a horizontal band. Most buildings actually have this kind of a horizontal banding. This is really historical architecture where you have a base, you have a shaft, and then you have the capitol. Most buildings have something like this. You can see buildings like the James Building and down in the bottom is a very unique building, and whose the very top of the building is with a lot of different kinds of architecture at the very top, very different than, let's say, on the top right, the train station, which is just a gabled roof, very simple and clean. But the point is, we took our building, we took the same theme, which is basically having a base, a shaft, and then the capitol at the top. Next slide. Now let's go to other building elements. Window and door proportions, size, design, and pattern of spacing between openings should be compatible with historic treatments of windows and doors in the district. So we looked at the basic windows. If you advance, most of the buildings in downtown Madison, they tend to cluster the windows rather than having punch-out windows. They tend to cluster them in groups of 2 or 3 or 4. These are just some of many examples that do that. Ours on the lower right, we're doing the same thing, clustering windows of 3 on the far right and far left, and a cluster of 4 in the center. The heights of buildings in downtown. If you look at the overall sort of Google Earth image of downtown Madison, I think most people would be surprised to see the amount of buildings that are about 40 feet and over. Most people think of Madison as being a series of 1 or 2 story buildings, and that might be true, but here's about 15 or 16 buildings that are way over that. They're at least 40 feet and above. We just want to bring that to your example. So when we look at the next slide, which shows the relationship between Hartley Dodge all the way down to Main Street on the right-hand side. Actually, Mr. Stern had asked this question: how does the building fit in between Lincoln Place and Main Street? So we did this drawing showing the connection between sort of the south side to the north side. The top image actually shows the original or the existing movie theater, which happens to be a little bit over that diagonal line. So it's actually, it's a little hard to see at the scale, but at 42 feet 2 inches, it's a little bit over the diagonal between the train station and the British Pine Emporium. The lower image actually shows our proposed building, which we've actually lowered it. You can see the yellow portion in the back right is the map that we've taken off. In the front left in orange, we've added a little bit to the front. So we've really stayed in that same scale between the train station and Main Street. To look a little bit closer, when we look at the train station directly across the street, we try to be respectful of that building. And we see that between the gabled roof and the front face of the building, there's a 37-foot front wall. We took our parapet at the front, and it's actually lower at 34 feet 8 inches. And then if you look at the top of the train station building at 49 feet, we're in fact lower than that by almost 10 feet to the finish of our roof. So we're certainly lower than the building directly across the street. If you look on Lincoln Place and you look west, you then get to see in context to other buildings. Primarily, you see, again, I'll reinforce the train station across the street, how it fits into that. The buildings to the east or to the right of the proposed building are a series of one-story buildings. It's hard to look at those buildings in comparison to even the movie theater building or even 6 Lincoln Place. They're very small buildings, but we're trying to show the relationship between it and other buildings on the block. So when you look at the other direction, you actually see 6 Lincoln Place, whose height to its parapet is about 33 feet, 10 inches to the top. Our parapet is 34 feet, 8 inches. So we're within a foot of actually matching the height of the building along Lincoln Place. So the eye perceives that as the first part of the building you see. And then there's about a 10-foot back, it recesses back to the finished roof at 39 feet, 8 inches. And now we'll take you to the proposed plans of the building. The cellar floor plan primarily is a parking garage with 24 parking spots, 1 parking spot per unit upstairs because there are 24 units upstairs. There's also 1 ADA compliant spot right next to the elevator as well. And on the west side of the building, you see basically the mechanical services of incoming services for water and gas on the top left side, stairs going upstairs, refuse rooms, building storage, bicycle storage, and then electrical storage going from left to right. In the back of the building, there's refuse containers in the back. We'll speak about that more a little bit later in the discussion. I'm sorry, let's go back in. And you can see along the bottom edge is the alleyway between our building and the Romanelli buildings. You come down the alleyway and then you turn left into the parking garage. I think that's all for that. The first floor of the building has 2 retail stores in the front of the building. One is about almost 1,000 square feet. One is about 800 square feet. Entrances, of course, are on Lincoln Place in the center of the building. Behind them are 6 apartments. 3 of them are COA units. 2 of them are 2 bedrooms, and 1 of them is a 3-bedroom. And the other units on that floor are each 1-bedroom market rate apartments. In the center of the building, facing west, is a residential lobby. And inside of that is of course, the elevator and stairs going up to the 2nd and 3rd floor, plus a mailroom. And of course, there's also the double-loaded corridor down the center of the building that you see.
Jeff, before
Yes.
you leave that slide,
Yes.
in speaking to our client, a retail tenant has not been identified. So there is a chance that it would be 1 tenant, right? Depending on how the marketing goes.
That's correct. And that's a good point, Peter, because so we're showing a wall down the center that either will be built or not be built. And it could zig and zag a little bit depending on the needs of a particular retail tenant. And we show the ability for either 1 or 2 tenants to bring any refuse, or for them to get down to basement, but they'll be bringing refuse out the front door anyways. But again, we'll discuss that later. On the 2nd floor, we have 1 more COA unit that's on the west side in the center, a 2-bedroom unit. And then we have a series of 2-bedroom units on the corner, each corner of the building, and 1 more 2-bedroom on the west side. And then 3 1-bedroom units facing the east side. There's a double-loaded corridor, 2 sets of stairs, and an elevator that serves those units. And there's also a refuge room right in the center with a trash chute as well. There are typical floor plans on the bottom of the page, but we don't need to discuss them unless you'd like to get into those. On the 3rd floor, though, it's very similar, almost identical to the 2nd floor. What we have on the 3rd floor are also 2-bedroom units on each of the corners. We have 2-bedroom units on the west side, And we have 3 one-bedroom units on the east side as well. These units are a little bit unique. And just so you know, the reason why there are what we'll call the square sort of pattern in some of those rectangles is because we have what's basically a double height space on the 3rd floor for these units. And if we go to the level above, which we call the recessed roof or the mezzanine plan, we have mezzanines that are, we have 1 mezzanine that serves each of the units on the 3rd floor. So this is, the entire 3rd floor is the mezzanine level plus the level that it looks down upon is the 3rd floor. What you also see in gray is the open space that we'll talk a little bit more later. It's the space that the tenants can use both as a public amenity and some of them are private amenities as well.
Jeff?
Yes.
Just please confirm that all the color units meet the minimum square footage requirements.
Yes, they all do. Absolutely.
Okay. And
Yes.
then just, you're going to get into a discussion on height, I know, but just, I think it's useful to point out that this plan for this building meets the 45-foot maximum height.
Yes, it does. And we'll show you a section drawing showing how the building meets the average grade plane limitations. On the roof plan, this shows again, it shows in this case, the highest roof of the building, which is below the average grade plane. This is not accessible to the tenants at this level. This is strictly for maintenance in case there's any issues with the roof in gray. What I'd like to talk to you about is sort of a unique feature that we have in this building. It's a mezzanine, which is part of the 3rd floor of the building. I'll just take you through it very simply. If you walk into the entry to the building, in front of you, you walk into, let's say, the side of the kitchen, and then directly in front of you is this double height space, which is the living, dining, and part of the kitchen area. To the other side of that is the bedroom and the bathroom and the stair. But what's unique is that you see a set of stairs that lead up. And that leads up to, if you look at the axiometric drawing on the right-hand side, it leads up to that yellow space, which is the mezzanine. And what we found to be incredibly important at this day and age, particularly in this sort of COVID pandemic, is that I think we all are, we've all been accustomed to hearing how many people have been moving out of apartments, whether it be in New York or Hoboken or Brooklyn or anywhere, moving back to the suburbs because they needed space. And what occurred to us was that most apartments have 8-foot ceilings, maybe if you're lucky, 9-foot ceilings. They don't expand other than what you see to the walls to your left or to the right. But we were able to achieve in this apartment and stay within the legal envelope of Madison zoning was to be able to create a higher space on the 3rd floor. And that higher space is this loft space. So now if you can imagine, you come into your apartment and rather than just being trapped amongst the sort of 4 walls of the apartment, you get to go up a small flight of stairs to this mezzanine that looks down upon the large open space. Now, if you're someone who is stuck doing Zoom meetings all day long, you don't need to be with your partner or child, whatever, stuck in the living room or the kitchen table. You can go up to that little space. You could have a little Zoom meeting up there. You could watch TV up there if you wanted to. You could use this as for any kind of space that you want to escape. And for us, it's as much about the quality of life that we're trying to enhance for anyone renting space in Madison as anything else. And I'll just digress for a moment. I've been in Madison for over 20 years, and for over 20 years, I've been hearing, wouldn't it be nice to have a place for people who are retiring to not leave Madison because there's not good housing stock in downtown, in apartments, nothing that really desirable if you're going to leave your house. But we thought now, if you had this unit, that you had a little bit of place to do your arts and crafts upstairs, you could watch TV, you could read a book. And then also that little green space in front of the yellow is an outdoor space. There's no roof above it. There's no windows in front of you. It's just an open railing. So now when you go up to this mezzanine level, you have some indoor space that looks down upon the loft, and you now have some outdoor space as well. So now in case you needed to stay in your apartment for an extended length of time, we think this is an ideal place to be there. And we think that also we've been designing houses for people, single family houses. And in Madison, we all look at these beautiful family rooms, living rooms with double height spaces, and we cherish them. Every designer and every builder wants to put them into their house, and everyone wants to buy them. But we don't have any for desk rent. We don't have any for apartment renters, and it's really about time that someone renting an apartment could have a quality of life that begins to approach upon the single house homeowner. They get to have their private amenity space in their mezzanine and their outdoor space, and there's also a public amenity space on the roof of the building as well. So we think for those reasons, this mezzanine space is ideal, not just both for the actual tenant who lives there, but for Madison, because we think it's going to attract a different kind of tenant in Madison, one who will really take more authorship of their space, want to stay here during all times. So for those reasons, we think it's fantastic. And when we look at a plan of the amount of square footage that the mezzanines are in relation to the floor of the third floor. So the yellow represents the mezzanine, and they are approximately 120 square feet. They occupy very little space, but what happens to each of the apartments is that the apartments have a double height space, just like our homes, and then it has a mezzanine space. So it all of a sudden becomes this unique and special place to live in Madison. Besides it being a transit village, the perfect transit village apartment unit, it also was a wonderful place to now live, to have more open space, larger windows, more light, more air. So then if you also look at the amount of what we'll call amenity green space in the building, this would be the recessed level. We have the mezzanine space in yellow, but all the green space is all open space to the tenants, some of it private, most of it public amenity space. So again, if you are trapped in doing your office work or your homework or whatever it is in this building, you can go outside and find your own little space up on the roof, whether it's yours or the public space, and you can stay here for a year. We think it's very compatible and desirable for someone to live here. Mr. Stern also asked, can we take a look at the building if we cut sections through it north, south, and east, west? So if you look at it through the north, south section, what we see is all the mezzanine spaces that look down upon the loft spaces as well. The lofts, you can see even more so in the east-west section, the loft spaces on the left-hand side, you see this double height space. Now, we find that in single-family houses, but here we have a loft space in an apartment. It couldn't be a more desirable way to live in downtown Madison now, to have a loft space, a mezzanine space, outdoor space, green space, large windows, light, air. We think if you want to attract people to Madison, this is how you do it. And we do want to attract people, and we want to keep people. So we think these are really a great technique to do this and stay within the boundaries, the envelope of the building. We go back to this slide because there's an issue about whether a mezzanine is considered a story or not. And I just want to attack this head on. We've done work, as you know, because of my, yes.
If I can, just in context, Mr.
Sure.
Stern in his review memo raised the specter as to whether this constitutes an extra floor. So I just wanted to give the context.
Is that right? Thank you. So having done work around the country, we work with the code called the International Building Code, the IBC. The IBC is a compendium of sort of building codes, mostly bordering on zoning issues as well, building materials, sizes, relationships. It's a compendium of information that's put together by architects, engineers, planners, land use attorneys, anyone who understands anyone who understands how to build buildings and what is the right thing to do for the homeowner, for the renter, for the community. And this is used all over the country, whether it's in New York City, in a big city, or in a town like Madison. What happens is that the towns say, if there's anything very special and unique to my community, we will write something special to override the IBC. But if we think that the IBC is good, it's adequate, it's rational and reasonable in its thinking, we look to the IBC to provide that information to us. And what we do around the country and every other designer, we look to the municipality and look for what they state for their unique and maintain their interests. When they are silent, and that's the term that's used, when they are silent on a particular issue, it's understood that it means that they fall back to the IBC. And they understand that they're not going to write thousands of pages. They'll write the couple of hundred pages that are unique to their municipality, but they'll let the IBC speak for itself on all the other issues. Now, it turns out in Madison, you would not find the word mezzanine in our ordinances. No place is it found mezzanine. So it's understood that Madison is silent on the issue of mezzanine. It looks to the IBC for what the definition of mezzanine is. And now if we go to the definition of mezzanine in the IBC, this is the most current New Jersey edition of the IBC. It says a mezzanine or mezzanines in compliance with section 5052 shall be considered a portion of the story below. Such mezzanines shall not contribute to either the building area or number of stories as regulated by section 5031, which is about height and area limitations. It goes on to say, the aggregate area of a mezzanine within a dwelling unit that is located in a building equipped throughout with an approved automatic sprinkler system in accordance with sections 903.311 and 1.2 shall not be greater than 1/2 of the floor area of the room. It goes on to say upon which it looks down upon. So what we did was we created mezzanines no greater than half of the loft space in which it looks down upon. And because Madison is silent on the word mezzanine, we use the mezzanine for the enhancement of the building, the tenants, the town, everyone associated with it. We think this is wonderful that we have this opportunity for everyone associated with this proposed building. We could move on from here and just look at the elevations of the building.
Jeff,
Yes.
before you do that, I just want to put out there the Madison Borough definition of story.
Okay.
So just reading from the ordinance, that portion of a building included between the surface of any floor and the surface of the floor next above it, or if there is no floor above it, then the space between the floor and the ceiling next above it. So here with the mezzanine, with the guidance of other codes that are often looked to, in your opinion, under the Madison definition of story, we are not creating an additional story here.
I'm going to say as an architect, he can't make that opinion. It's a legal question. Maybe Mr. Phillips will address it, but I don't think that's a question for an architect, with all due respect. But go ahead and answer it. I'm just saying, I don't put much weight
I
on
mean,
it.
I respectfully, I think that architects can speak to the definition of a story and then compare it to their design and offer an opinion as to whether it's a story or not.
Right, no, you're talking about interpreting a zoning ordinance, not a building code. Those are different issues. I'm sorry, but I disagree.
Yeah.
Okay.
But go ahead.
Yeah.
Let's down the road. I'm just saying my opinion.
If I could just add this, and I think that the definition of story within the Madison Code is certainly an accurate one, but obviously it's a very general definition because what it doesn't address obviously are mezzanines. If the IBC actually speaks specifically about it speaks about a story, and then it goes on to say, however, a mezzanine is not considered a story because of the following. But also in Madison, it doesn't speak about other things that would be considered a story. If you had an elevator bulkhead, a stair bulkhead, an equipment bulkhead, a maintenance bulkhead, any of those kinds of things, if you had a mezzanine on the first floor in a commercial space, you don't consider that a story. So I am giving my opinion on looking at how Madison is silent on the word mezzanine and maybe not silent on the word story, but they're not defining story and removing all the other possibilities that would create stories in Madison, like the 5 that I just mentioned. They're silent on all of those because I think they leave it up to the IBC to define those more specifically.
Well, that's fine. I'm not aware of any legal case law or statute that says we do that, but go ahead. I understand what you're saying.
Okay. All right. So these are the elevations of our building. Of course, you see the front elevation, the south elevation facing Lincoln Place. I think we sort of have seen this before. I don't want to speak too much about it other than, let's see, the ground floor retail space, of course, and then the next 2 floors are the second and third floor of pure residential space as well. And we think that, this building, and we'll speak more about it later, it really speaks to what all of downtown Madison is about, not necessarily downtown Lincoln Place, because we could not find anything on Lincoln Place that would suggest one following the design standards of other buildings on that block. So we really looked for the strength of all of downtown Madison, of which there are many good buildings. And as we've spoken before, we really looked to see what are the most important architectural elements of those buildings and use those as jumping off points for our building as well. On the north elevation, this is from basically looking from Main Street, or looking from the Nautilus, I should say. That's in the top left, and the other elevation, the west elevation, is looking from the post office itself. On the upper right-hand side, I thought it's good to see this because the entrance to the building, to the residential portion, is along the western side of the building. And you see the sign where it says 14 Lincoln Place on a sort of vertical in that direction. And we see a railing on the side that separates our building's property line from the post office's property line. And we also see in the back, what's important to note is that we did take this element that you're seeing, it's a little hard to see at the scale, of course. We felt that one of the most interesting parts about the movie theater was the ticket booth. Because it's made out of plywood and not in very good shape, we couldn't try and reuse that or repurpose that itself. It would may fall apart in just trying to disassemble it. But we thought it would be a very good place to take like a relief of this, and maybe in metal, and have this be like a little sculptural object in the back of that little garden. So you can see this object as you're walking down Lincoln Place and peer down and see this sort of memory of the ticket booth as sort of like a relief towards the back of the building. We also thought that what we thought was good to borrow or take from the movie theater building was at the very top, there's a plaque that says Lions Movie Theater, 1925. There are plans to remove that. People don't even know that it's up there. It's even though it's not that high, people don't really look up there. Someone's eye is only 30 degrees vertical, 30 degrees, both up and down. You don't really see that sign, but we thought if we could put it in a lower position, and below that, put 2 plaques that would talk about what the movie theater building was and what it meant to the town, and maybe with photographs, then people of all sizes and ages could see both of these kinds of objects, the plaques as well as the old stone plaque at the top of the building. It would give a little bit of memory of what was on the site.
We should honor the process that we went through with the Historic Preservation Commission for a number of aspects of our design. But if you can go back to the last slide,
Yes.
Particularly the placement of the existing plaque, which is currently hardly visible on the front of the building, and then the 2 plaques below it, which, and the applicant hired a historian who worked with the HPC at quite some length to come up with text and pictures and other things that ultimately the HPC signed off on and was happy with. So there was an entire process, as the board may or may not be aware of, that this applicant went through to respect the placement of the property in the historic preservation area. And so what you see there and in other aspects of the design represents that process.
Well, we're aware of the mandatory conditions. Obviously, we heard the appeal of several conditions. So the board should, I'm aware as a board member, but the other board members are probably also aware of what the conditions were and the cooperation that was had around preserving certain aspects of the theater.
Right, thank you. And subsequent to that appeal before you, we then worked yet further with the HPC on these details. So we're proud of that work that we did with them.
Okay. Some of the other things that we are using in the design of the new building is that along the front of the building and also along the side leading back to the entry to the residential units, we're going to match the pavers that Madison has as their standard pavers throughout. Also, go ahead. Yeah, sorry. Oh, it's not moving on my screen. I'm sorry. My screen is, oh, there it is. Thank you. Also, there was a question raised about the HVAC units, or really the condensers that are up on the roof. Someone had asked, will they be visible from the roof? But in actuality, they are recessed into the recessed roof, and they are behind these walls that you're seeing. That particular section has no window in it. It's just open. It's also open above. So all the condenser units will, you would not see them. You can maybe see 1% of them, I suppose, if you really took out a pair of binoculars, but you would not see any condensers sticking up top of this building as you see in other buildings. They're all hidden. On the front of the building, we wanted just to make sure that you know that we're using the same bicycle racks that are the downtown standards, as well as a park bench we want to put in front of the building as well. The brick that you see there, it's similar to the brick that's at 6 Lincoln Place. It's a little on the slightly brown or red side, depending on the screen that you're looking at. And the building mostly is a brownish brick building, matching a lot of the brownish brick that's used in downtown Madison. We have metal windows that are powder coated, a grayish tone. The canopy is also metal, but it also is infused with wood at the same time. And we also have a canvas canopy in the center of the building. So the center of the building sort of stands out by a slightly larger canopy, as well as a slightly higher cornice right in the center as well. If you're looking towards the west, we're showing the building how it looks in relation both to the train station across from it. The buildings to the right of it are a very small one-story building. This building winds up being almost a corner building, which is unusual to be in the mid-block, but it's so exposed on really all 4 sides. However, if you look from the west and looking east, though, then you begin to see what's more natural, which is buildings that are a little bit taller, at least even the post office, that begins to put this building into context. And you can see that 6 Lincoln Place is really about the same kind of massing as our proposed building is. Let's see. Right. So just going back to the front of the building, and I think what this building will also do is to sort of vitalize the downtown. You can see we even have some of the outdoor spaces on the 2nd floor of the building, so that there might be people in their balconies that are, can overlook Lincoln Place as well. Okay. That really concludes our presentation.
Jeff, I have a few questions for you. Okay, so you referred to, and we showed the historic plaques and the work with the HPC. Additionally, pursuant to the HPC process, we're going to reuse an existing chandelier within the building, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and you described the condition of the ticket booth, and as a recognition of that, the agreement with the HPC was that that ticket booth would be available to the HPC in the borough, and the borough has agreed to find a place to store it until final use of that is determined.
Correct.
Okay, can you describe any noise reduction techniques utilized for the project?
Yes, of course. Well, the exterior walls will be masonry wall construction, which has obviously a lot of mass, and as such, it has a lot of absorbent quality to it. The exterior wall insulation will be a high-density fiberglass board. The exterior windows will be commercial-grade double pane glass with a vacuum seal between the panes of glass. The exterior windows will have a double layer of acoustical sealant at the perimeter of the window openings where they are set into the walls. The operable casement windows will have continuous acoustical gasket seals in them also.
So does that reflect the design of a building that's located across the street from a train track and train station?
Yes, the one you're looking at on the screen now, you're speaking of course?
Yeah, your design.
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Okay. Can you review any environmentally friendly or green features of the project?
Yes. Well, first, I think it's important if you remembered all of the green areas on the roof of the building, both in pavers as well as green areas that are both landscape and shrubbed. We expect that people will use the roof of this building as a place to retreat from and go to for enjoyment and to spend time with family and with friends. Let's look at one more thing. I'm sorry.
Well, let's talk.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So, we plan to use sort of low flow shower heads and energy efficient residential appliances within the residential units. The dual flush toilets and any sort of censored urinals will be used on the commercial tenants alone on the ground floor. We will also propose the split unit condensers to service units will be, they'll utilize either gas or electric, once an MEP engineer decides which is the most sustainable for these units. I think we're open to either one of those, and that will be determined going forward. The project will also use a light colored heat reflective material on the roof, and will have generous glazing that will provide enhanced natural daylight and reduce the need for artificial lighting. We'll have sustainably sourced finished wood and locally sourced masonry. We'll also minimize the use of any structural steel and concrete, which is we known to have a lot of high embedded carbon content. Within the parking garage, there are 4 parking spaces that we plan to have electric boxes hooked to them so that they'll be able to be charged for any electric vehicles or available for electric vehicle charging going forward as well.
Can you just review the signage with us?
Yes, we have a drawing for that. So the front of the building, you can see there are 2 signs that are backlit, and those signs, along with 2 blade signs that are to the left and to the right, and one more sign that says 14 to the left of one of the blade signs. And then there's one more sign that we spoke about before that says 14 Lincoln on the way back, which is also a sort of backlit sign. So those are the signs in the front of the building. And the sides on the side of the building are, and this is where I'm going to say something, but not include the plaques for a moment, is we have, because the street is truly a street that you'll only be walking on the sidewalk on the sort of northern side of the block. Very, very few people will be on the train sidewalk, obviously. So we think having signs that face people on the sidewalk are really critical, as you won't really be even across the street to see many of the signs. You'll be walking east or west. So we have both blade signs, and we also have 2 more lit signs that face east and face west. Now, all of those signs, including the 14 Lincoln sign, which is the larger sign right in front of the residential entry doors, they total a little under 50 square feet, which is the allowable amount of signs that we're allowed to have in this building. We were asked and delighted to put in some additional plaques, reuse the plaques from the existing building, and those plaques take us above 50 square feet. So one of our variances is basically asking you to allow us to use more than 50 square feet for signage, because above the 50 are all the historical plaques that we spoke about earlier.
Mr. Gertler, this is Russell Stern. Hi.
Yes.
How are you?
Good. How are you, Mr. Stern?
Good. I'm only interrupting because this drawing is up on the screen and there's lots of drawings. This drawing shows the historical plaque as well as one history plaque, but your earlier presentation with 2 history plaques is what you're actually proposing, correct?
Yes, the HPC had asked for us at a later time to include another plaque with photographs in it. So we are requesting 2 plaques, not just 1 additional plaque below the large, Lions Movie Theater plaque.
Right, that was the prior exhibit.
That's correct, yeah.
And then only because you have this up, and I don't want to lose track on it, could you explain this backlit signage section detail?
Sure. Is that like in the front of the building, do you mean? I guess the one on the left-hand side?
The
Sure.
reason is,
Yes.
I don't know what that detail is associated with, or where the
Okay.
back of the building would be, the face of the
Yeah.
building.
Okay, so there are 2 different kinds of backlit signs. The one on the lower left-hand side, which is so detail number 4, is the signs that said sort of retail, tenant in the front of the building. And what that is that there would be a piece of metal that has a stencil cutout that might have the name of, let's say it says Gertler Wente Architects, for example, on the front. So the metal would be cut out with the name of the store. And behind that would be a very low-level LED light that would shine light through the stencil cutout of the letters. So, and then there would be a piece of acrylic that is in between the stencil cutout and the LED light itself. So it's really just a soft fused light level emanating from the white acrylic, which is behind the metal cutout. And that's in the band that then has wood surrounding it, to the left and to the right, and slightly above it and below it.
And thank you. And then also, while we're on that slide, the drawings, at least that I had received, it was just the print quality. You couldn't see all the contrast, and because of that, it was hard to detect all the variety of building materials that you're proposing, such as on the upper left elevation. It's really not clear, and I don't think you detailed that out in your testimony about the building materials.
Okay.
And it seems as though that there's some type of base course there. There's different materials that you're utilizing for the canopies. Could you go a little further in that explanation?
Sure.
Thank
Sure.
you.
I wonder if maybe we bring up another elevation that's a little bit larger. Do it. Yeah, we'll use this one. Okay, Russell, and it's a bit easier to see. So we talked about the brownish tone brick and the powder coated metal window frames, which are both of the storefront window as well as the residential window units as well. But along the base of the building, because of snow and salt and equipment that cleans the snow and the salt, we thought we'd put in sort of a granite base along the bottom of the building so that so the brick doesn't get damaged. We think the granite has a longer life longevity than the brick does. It'll look better. So we put that along the bottom. And along the signs where it says retail store, we wanted to introduce another building material. So in addition to the metal canopy itself, we introduced a band of wood that is recessed into basically a C-channel of steel for the canopy. So really the canopy is a series of wood, of metal, of canvas, and then the actual lit sign itself. No other real materials, except we hope to maybe have some planters in the front of the building. This is, you see a little bit of green poking through, and we hope that we can introduce some planters in the base of basically the columns of the building. That's really primarily, if not all, the materials. And of course, glass.
Jeff, those signs in the canopy, they're at least 8 feet off the front surface?
Yes, they are. That's correct. And we were asked whether they are also, how far away are they from the curb itself? As we know, the present movie theater canopy gets hit periodically by trucks going by. So this canopy only sticks out 5 feet. I think the other canopy sticks out 13 feet. So we're 8 feet further in from the existing canopy. So it should not be getting hit going forward.
And the canopy signs are recessed as well?
The signs are recessed. They do not stick out. That's correct.
And also on this elevation, this is a good elevation for it. And also maybe we should also look at the side elevation and the rear elevation, but particularly the bulkhead. So what is the purpose of the bulkhead? What functions does it serve? What mechanical equipment is in there? And will there be other air conditioning condensers on that roof?
Okay.
So
Well,
there wasn't a detailed mechanical equipment plan for the roof.
okay. So why don't we do two things? What you're seeing now where it says in that little grayish zone, the only bulkhead we have that goes above the roof line of the building is only to serve the elevator that has the elevator overrun to it. That's all. I wonder, Shevchenko, could we go to the plan for a moment? I think it would be good to see that looking down onto the building. And right there, that's probably great. Can you just show the mechanical area? So that area, Russ, is where all the compressors are in there. And they are, as you can see, they're recessed into the building. So they are not visible. They don't stick above the roof line of the building. And they're only visible if you were looking directly east into an open area. So really, but from Lincoln Place, they virtually can't be seen.
Could they, and they cannot be seen from
Main Street or from anywhere, they can't be seen. I think the only place you could see them is a diagonal peek through from Lincoln Place. And you probably just see one compressor. You see that one little white strip in there? There might be a compressor over there that you would see one.
Okay.
So that's it.
Then the bulkhead for the elevator, how's that exterior treated? You've depicted it in a white. Would that be something that you just want to blend in with the sky or blend into the building? How is that taken care of?
Yeah, no, good question. We'd like it to go away, obviously. So we thought a lighter color blending into the sky would be the way to do it. It doesn't look like it takes away from the rhythm of the building. It's something in and of by itself, so to speak.
And the material is ephes, or is it a metal?
Probably ephes, something like that. It really won't, the way we're seeing this is of course, it's a head-on two-dimensional view. The reality is that when you're looking at the building from eye level and in perspective, then the edges of the building actually conceal the height of the overrun.
Right, but
So,
the concern is that it's located across from the historic Madison train station, and so there's another blue viewing platform. I guess that platform would be a little under. Perhaps you could address that. The view from the Madison train station from the platform. How much of that is visible?
well, you'll certainly see the way you see the roofs of every single building in Madison. We would not be an exception to that because we are not higher than the train station. In fact, I wonder we could actually do one thing is that, Shevchenko, could you go to the section, the long section between Hartley Dodge, almost. Yeah, that one.
Okay.
You could imagine that you could see where the platform is on the train, right? You could, right, where Shevchenko is pointed that. So your head is, your eyes, let's say 5'6" or whatever, 6 feet above that. So you're looking largely at the face of the building. You will see probably half of the elevator overrun because part of it will be concealed just in perspective by the front of the building.
Okay.
Does that answer that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Jeff, can you lead us through how refuse and recyclable removal operations will?
Sure. Okay, great.
Before we get to that, can I just put one or two other things in real quick? I just want to note that and I'm just adding to what Russell had talked about, Mr. Stern, was that we're in receipt of a memorandum from the Downtown Development Commission, the DDC, from Madison dated Jan 26, 2021. And there was 2 memos from them, but the one that has to do with signage, the sign and facade committee was received by the board. I just want to note that I would say it was generally favorable, but we'll let them weigh in and say what they want. There was one concern about the backlit illuminated signage that you explained a minute ago. And I just wanted to say that at some point, maybe at the public section, when they get a chance to talk, they can double back and we'll hear their opinion about the signage. And then also I wanted to just say that when we did the appeal process and we looked at all of the conditions, in particular the ones that were under appeal, I just wanted to note that I think at some point we're going to have to tie together with this application the mandatory conditions that were agreed to. Gary, you could comment on that, but that was my thinking, because there were a number of conditions that the applicant did agree to. And one thing I just wanted to point out was when we were talking about this earlier, I was kind of pulled it out. I'm been paging through it as you've been talking, but I just noted that mandatory condition 5, 6, 7, and 8 from the HPC resolution have to do with preserving the plaque, preserving the materials, the ticket booth, and so on and so forth. So it seems to me, and I just like to hear, it sounds like you're complying with those.
Yes, we are.
Yes, Mr.
Sorry,
Chairman,
Peter.
we actually, I believe, have a document confirming that. If it wasn't submitted, we'll submit it.
Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure of that. And then also there was a mandatory condition number 11 that had to do more or less with the building design. It talked about reddish brick and the canopy and et cetera. It appears like you've incorporated those themes there. I just want to ask you whether you feel you've done that.
Yes, we have.
We do.
Oh, sorry, Peter, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, we have incorporated those into the design of the building.
Okay.
And yeah.
Okay, great. I just want to tie that together. That's it.
Jeff, you're going to lead us. Are you done, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Yeah. Jeff, you're going to lead us through the refuse and recyclable operation?
Yes, okay.
Wilson, just one moment, even though I'll have questions later on, just because we were on all those slides, could you address the floor to ceiling heights for the first floor, second floor, third floor, and that mezzanine?
Yeah, and Jeff, while you do that, you refer to the fact that we're compliant under the ordinance in terms of being under the 45-foot maximum. Maybe you could just speak to how the formula works under the ordinance and the calculation.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you. Well, we blew up this slide because it shows the basically floor to floor heights and its relationship both to Lincoln Place and to the average grade plane. We all, I think, know what the average grade plane is and how it's computed, so I won't get into that. But our computation with Bowman Engineering, it is 5 foot 4 inches below Lincoln Place. So as such, you measure 45 feet, which is the allowable height of a building above the average grade plane in this zone. So we are at the 45-foot mark with our building from average grade plane. However, from Lincoln Place, which is 5 foot 4 inches, basically subtracting it from 45 feet, we are 39 feet 8 inches from Lincoln Place. And now if you look at basically the floor to floor heights between the ground floor and the second floor, there's 11 foot 6 between ground floor and second floor. And then we have 9 foot 10 between the second and third floor slab, and then 18 foot 4 between the third floor slab and the top of the roof slab.
Did you do a breakout for the mezzanine?
You mean for what aspect? For the
For the floor of the mezzanine to the ceiling?
well, we have, I think, 9 feet floor to ceiling. I would have to check that for the units themselves, and then a foot of construction. And then the mezzanine would be, as you can see, above that. So if that number is right, it would be 18.4 minus roughly 10. So it would be, oh, and plus the foot of the roof. So that would be 7'4". I think we had 8'6" on the loft spaces.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And Jeff, just while you're there, if we didn't have the mezzanine, the unit would otherwise be as it's configured, right?
Yeah, I think certainly the loft space is an ideal situation. So yes, it would be the same unit.
And the appearance from the front elevation would be the same.
Would be the same, correct?
Thank you.
And the mezzanine, you gave the figure at approximately 110 square feet?
Well, they do change.
That would have excluded all the decking.
Yeah, well, the decking, well, let me just, so they change in size because they're allowed to be 1/2 of the area of the loft space itself. So you can see on this drawing, they range in size. 122, I think, is the biggest one. And the smallest one is under 100. So they vary in size. Let's say between 100 and 120, roughly speaking.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, back to garbage.
Thank you for that intro, Peter. Okay. Actually, why don't we start on the second floor for the sake of argument. The second and third floor is where the garbage emanates from, basically. And we just want to show that in the center of the building, there's a refuse room. And that refuse room is where there's a trash chute and a place to put recyclables. So tenants on the second and third floor would come to this room. They would put their trash into the trash chutes. It would go down to the basement. They would put their recyclables into the recyclable boxes in the trash room itself. The trash goes down directly, of course, to the lowest level, to the cellar, and it goes to a compactor. And you can see the compactor that is being shown. The compactor, basically, as you probably know, it pushes all the garbage into these small, neat cubes in a wrap, and it goes into these containers called totes. And those are, they sort of slip into them, and you see we have them lined up where the door into the compactor room is. They're just slipped into those, and then the building super will take them and exit out of the compactor room, out into the garage area, back to the back of the building, and take them out to where they're stored in the outdoors into the refuse location. And they're stored there until the refuse the garbage hauler comes. They'll come approximately 2 days a week. We had a conversation with them and talked about how many totes he might need, how many deliveries he might use, and we have found that this to be a more than adequate size location for the location of all these totes in there. What he'll do is he'll be backing his garbage truck down the alley, which he's used to doing, backing it down. And he'll park his vehicle there, and in 5 or 10 minutes, he'll take out the amount of totes that he needs down that hatched area. There's a set of double doors from our refuse area. They'll just wheel them down to the truck, put them on the back of the truck, which will be picked up. And, you've seen these trucks with their mechanisms dumping everything into their trucks. They'll push the totes back into the refuse room, and they'll scoot back up the driveway in 5 or 10 minutes. Likewise, all of the recyclables that are gathered on the second and third floor, the tenants themselves will leave them there. The building super will take the containers from each of those floors, and they'll take the elevator down to the lowest level. And they'll put them into this sort of refuse container area on the lowest level, and they'll be taken out by the same carting removal service as the ones that will be taking the refuse. Whether that's 1 day a week or 2 days a week will depend on what the loads are, but they're prepared to do basically the exact same operation with the commingled and cardboard and paper. I think that describes that.
How about the retail refuse, which,
Oh, right, thank you. So the retail tenant is going to really take their refuse and take it out the front door and wheel it down the alleyway and then directly into the refuse area in the back of the building. They'll not be going through the building itself with their refuse.
and even if there was one tenant for the combined space, but if there were two tenants as the configuration is shown now, they're not expected to generate significant refuse, right?
No, that's correct. And we of course had that conversation with the hauler and looked at the square footage and what he thought the retail tenants might contribute and what the residential tenants, he thought that we had more than adequate space dealing with what our needs might be.
Jeff, I know you've had at least one conversation, if not more, with the fire chief relative to architectural questions. Can you just speak to those discussions?
Yes, we had a meeting with Chief DeRosa, and so the things that, of course, the most important is how do you put out a fire in this kind of building. The one thing he said first and foremost is that he's not taking any truck between buildings. They don't do that anywhere in Madison. They wouldn't risk anything like that. He said that the hydrants on Lincoln Place, as well as a hydrant that's behind the building, is more than adequate to fight the fire, that their hoses would be all that's required to circle the building 360 degrees to fight any fire. He knew that the back of the building often had vehicles and refuse tucked along the back of the building. He requested that maybe we could stripe a zone in the back, call it a fire lane or what have you, but just try and keep the refuse not attached to the building in that location the way it is now. So that's why we striped that 8 feet along the back of the building to keep that clean.
Yeah, and we're working on exhibits that will come back to you on those issues and other issues that were raised at the first hearing. Jeff, do you have anything else?
I don't think I do.
Okay, I would.
Ready for questions?
Well, can I just add something there on your discussion with the fire and police? Is I saw some email traffic on that, and I was not thrilled with the detail there. I would prefer, and this is just one board member speaking, to have something more formal from fire and police. Number one, acknowledging that they visited and saw the conditions on site. And number two is that they reviewed the proposal and what their suggestions or recommendations are, because based on those very short emails, I don't know if they've seen the site. I don't know exactly what they reviewed other than a chat. Okay, so they weren't conclusive enough for me, at least, anyway.
Yeah. So I'm sorry I didn't say this. So we met at Chief DeRosa's office, Eric Keller, and I'm sorry, Anthony Ficino, who was with Bowman at the time, and myself and Brandon Aviano from Saxon. The three of us met with Chief DeRosa, and he had a set of plans he had reviewed. He had visited the site, and his comments were based upon site visits and review of the drawings, and certainly a document from him would, if that's helpful, we could certainly make sure we get that from Chief DeRosa.
Yeah, I think we just got to tie that up. So if that's fine, if you've had that conversation and that's actually correct, then that would be great to have that in writing.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Chairman, do you want us to request that from him, or will the board request it from him?
Dennis, what do you think, or Gary?
But typically, if there was a meeting held, Mr. Chairman, there should be, notes or minutes or something that could be circulated and agreed to by both parties. Just summarizing what was discussed, what was agreed to. So I think something on that order that probably should be generated by the applicant.
Okay, we will do that.
So
Yeah.
we'll generate a memo that we will get him to sign off on.
Well, I think it's important that police and fire have seen it, and we have some documentation to the effect that they've seen this application and any suggestions that they have, just to tie that up, because there's issues back there. And, you know, we could always ask them to appear, but I don't think it rises to that level if you can just produce some sort of memorandum.
We understand, we think it's appropriate, and we're happy to facilitate in any way that we can.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, before we open Jeff up to questions, I wonder if we can get a determination from the board as to the number of stories based on his testimony.
I don't think we can do that. We haven't heard from our own planner yet. We haven't heard from Mr. Simon's planner. That's totally premature, in my opinion.
Okay, well, then consider it a request.
No, it's fine to ask, but I don't know how without a
Consider it-
record we can do that.
Yeah, I think that we should deal with this a little bit later on. During the planner section, we could talk about it. I haven't made up my mind, of course. I'm still taking in information, but it isn't terribly troubling whether it's 4 stories or 3 with a mezzanine. I think we could figure that out a little bit later on.
Okay, consider it a preview then. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, could I just ask a question regarding the lower level, the garage level? Could you, Jeff, would you be able to explain to the board the perforated brick? I guess the need is to provide circulation. There's also a planter because that will be exposed to the driveway area and to those adjoining residential lots that are located to the rear of the building.
Right. We wanted to keep the cellar level of the building at least open and airy, so there's ventilation in there. So we didn't want to have solid walls there, but also we didn't want to keep it so open as some other developments in Madison that you just look at parked cars. So, you know, there's a sort of a standard detail that's been used over the years, which we put on the screen. This is an image not of our building, of course, but just something we grabbed off the internet. It really shows bricks, how they're laid up in a pattern that there's open spaces and closed spaces, the way they're laid up. So you're creating an open, airy pattern without looking through them easily. I hope that's somewhat clear in the image that's on the screen now, the way that might look.
It's helpful.
It's really a decorative wall is what it is.
And there were, on one of those elevations, there were those 2 gray squares or rectangles on the rear elevation.
Right. Right. And the reason, right, I know there was some confusion. It's just because the section that we cut through the building, you're really looking at the earth. So we just colored them gray as a result of that.
Okay, and then to that lower level, garage level, that would be the perforated brick material?
That's correct. That's correct. Both on the side and on the back, right? And we also thought that on the side along the alleyway, you can see that little growy green stuff coming up, because between the columns, we thought we could put in a very small, you know, a narrow planter, but ivy would grow there, we think. And we could grow up the greenery as well. So it'd be soft in the edges. You're coming down the alleyway to have that lower level green with brick, and the columns we think would be very attractive.
Thank you.
Mr. Gertler, if I might, Mr. Chairman, with the open brick walls to the garage areas, Mr. Gertler, you're able to maintain the required circulation for the underground parking area?
With regard to an air system that's, you mean moving air itself, or?
Yeah, just that the code required open area or circulation air exchange is provided for the garage space.
Yeah, well, I think in a situation like this, which is desirable, is that, you know, obviously in any air circulation system, you want to have fresh air in and then exhaust air out. So in our exhaust air, it'll be easy to pull all the fresh air in from the open brick, which is why we're doing that also. They'll just pull the air in and then out on the other side. Just a equal air exchange of fresh air through the cellar.
Thank you.
Mr. Harrington, are there other engineering questions for the architect? Or are you satisfied or anything remaining?
Just one, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gertler, before you were referencing and going over the mechanicals on the rooftop, the air conditioner compressors, and just intuitively, it looks like that's a lot of equipment in a somewhat of a confined space. I just wondering if you've employed this type of an arrangement before, and that sufficient air circulation, for cooling of the units, is provided. It seems that they're fairly well shielded as far as noise, and concurrence with the New Jersey codes for that, for noise for neighboring properties. But really, just if you could inform the board of this type of an arrangement that you've done in a recessed area, and that there is sufficient air circulation for the compressor units.
Yeah, the answer is yes. We've done that on many multifamily projects where we obviously want to sort of corral the compressors in one area of a roof, and we've not had a problem working with the mechanical engineer, stacking them and putting them with a certain distance between them, having enough airflow below them and between them, sort of, horizontally to an open air above and also on one side. So this is, yes, we have done that kind of thing. And there's something that will be engineered, and we could certainly show you any calculations that you might want to have later on, making sure that the compressors are all working, correctly. There would be basically one compressor per unit. So there's really 24 units for the, for the residential units. And then there might be one more unit each for each of the retail spaces if they don't have them internally, but we think we'll have them on the roof for them. And any of the public spaces, like the corridors, might have one more unit for them. But that's, so there really aren't many, many buildings have many more than that. Actually, this is not a lot.
And is this a preferred arrangement than the through the wall units that you see a lot now, the P-TECs?
Sure. Well, it depends who you're speaking to. If you're speaking to a developer who wants to save a lot of money, then you put the P-TEC units through the wall, and you see the grills underneath every other window. Not a pretty sight. This developer had no desire to have a building, punctuated by grills. He wanted something pretty smart looking. So therefore, the compressors had to be on the roof and take all that mechanical grill work out of the front or side facades, or even the rear facades of the building.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a much cleaner look to the building. Just wanted to see if it had been considered, and I appreciate your answer, Jeff. Thank you.
So,
Mr.
can I throw something else out there? I know that at the last hearing, there were a number of items that you're going to respond to later. There were a couple of items that Mr. Keller indicated that Mr. Gertler should address. Just want to make sure that we've kind of ticked those off if they are, that the items that Mr. Gertler was going to tick off or talk to have been done.
I think one of those was the upgraded trash enclosure, which is depicted on the drawings right now as chain link fence with vinyl slats. And I believe Mr. Keller had mentioned that that was going to be looked into and hopefully treated with some sort of masonry type of wall system.
Yeah, so and that's correct. So basically the masonry would be around would be the west side of the building and then the north side of the building. Oh, good, thank you, Shasha. And then on the side that actually faces the public, which is where the doors are, we would put in basically a metal grill, and you probably have seen these. They're basically fins that are set on a diagonal, and they're all pointed down so that you can't see through them, but there's airflow through them. And they look like it's just a very clean gray, powder coated gray metal panel system, both the doors and the wall to the right of the doors. So and they would basically match that same gray metal that we're using around the balance of the building. So it becomes just an extension of the building itself.
So will that be shown on revised plans that will be submitted?
Yes, and you could actually, even on this plan, it says below that, says metal louvered screen wall system with doors.
Okay, but I think we'd probably like to see a detail also.
Okay.
I mean, this drawing has been revised since the last submission with that note.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
And also,
Mr. Gertler, you didn't mention your bicycle storage.
Okay, so very good. Thank you. So you could see on the same drawing, it's great. You could see a bicycle storage for 24 bikes to the left of the electric room, right in there. So everyone has access to store one bicycle in the building over there.
And in your parking, are there assigned spaces, or you're only allowed 24 cars in there, and it's everyone's for themselves because you'll have only 4 recharging stations. You only have 1 handicap space. How does that system work for parking?
Well, I think it'll be up to the owner eventually, but I mean, you're right. I mean, either each person gets an assigned space, which is probably the best way to do it, so there's no confusion, or you just, but the electric vehicles, if there are more than 4, that would be fantastic. And then we'll think about putting more in, I presume, but I don't want to speak for ownership, but those are the 4 that we're contemplating for EV vehicles. And whether or not it's a free-for-all for the other ones or an assigned spot, we think assigned spots are usually better, so there's no confusion. Everyone gets one spot.
That determination has been made. They'll be assigned, Mr. Stern.
Okay, thank you, Peter.
And maybe just installing the conduit for future lines for the electric charging spaces may be something to take a look at.
That would be, easy enough to put an empty conduit along that wall.
Yeah.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
and was it that you're going to come back and discuss it with the engineering, but there was a discussion about possibly widening the garage door slightly? Is that something you can talk about now, or that could happen later?
I think I could talk about that. We looked at trying to do that, but the reality is that there's a column, if you could show that, Shashan, right at the corner. So there's a column to the building right there. So we really can't go further left. But what we do have, and if you think about, and this is, I'll just preempt a little bit about what Mr. Keller will say. Between the open brickwork that you can see through, and Eric will speak about mirrors that we'll put in, and also some lights that we'll install so that anyone coming in or out will know that there's another vehicle who's attempting to, make the same, opposite movement with their vehicle. So we think with the multiple numbers of things that are occurring to signal to a car that another car is coming their way should be adequate for vehicle movement.
What about the clearance height of the garage? I think I understood that might be an issue.
Right. So there was a question that someone raised. They thought that we might need 10 feet to bring emergency vehicles in there. And we thought the only way to know where the 10 feet came from was to go over to the Madison Ambulance Corps with the tape measure and measure the vehicles. So I personally went there and measured the vehicles, and the highest vehicle is 8 foot 2 inches. So it turns out that the lowest point in our garage door is 8 foot 2 at that very, very corner. It just gets larger after that. I spoke to actually Lieutenant Longo about this, and he also acknowledged that didn't sound correct at 10 feet because it would really make these emergency vehicles very top heavy and you wouldn't want to put them on the roads and them tipping. So he said he would go take a look himself just to verify it. He didn't actually get back to me yet, but he certainly will do that. And that should be put in writing, his measuring of the vehicles also. But we feel, confident that we're okay with the 8'2".
So there's no code standard on that?
Well, the code standard is actually for ADA compliant vehicles, of which we are over that. So we have more than enough room for an ADA compliant vehicle, like if you're going to be bringing in wheelchairs. But this was, I think, the question specifically for an emergency, let's say ambulance, which we would say that we would think that you would really stay on Lincoln Place for anybody, that you wouldn't really want to come down the alley and then into the garage. You could just be on the street and come in and get out much quicker than this. So,
And Jeff, towards
Yes.
that end, the elevator is going to be designed to accommodate a gurney, right?
it will be designed to accommodate a gurney so that there would be no issue with someone coming down and getting out of the elevator on the ground floor and just coming right to Lincoln Place very quickly and easily without an ambulance making turns in and out of a garage, making K-turns. It didn't really make a lot of sense to us, but the question was asked. So we just wanted to measure the vehicles just to have that for your information.
I have another question for you, and you don't have to answer this now, and it's meant in the spirit of being helpful, because I know that you are considering a number of things you have to come back on relative to the parking back there and traffic flows and things like that. But it dawned on me that I think it's lot 12 is the one with the hydrant in front of it. It's actually on lot 11, but there's a hydrant that more or less blocks the parking. There's a fire zone in front of lot 12. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I wish we don't have a drawing in our deck that shows the location of the hydrant though.
Well, on the site plan, there's a small structure on lot 12. It's got it's a fire zone in front of it, and there's a hydrant just over the borderline on lot 11. It's
Mhm.
in the vicinity of that door there. And what I was just going to mention is it's clear that parking must be an issue on that other lot 11, 12, because as Mr. Stern and I observed people parking in the fire zone there. I was just going to throw out an idea, that is, if you remove that hydrant to improve the parking situation back there, is it feasible to say add a signage connection on the side of the building to replace that hydrant, which would then maybe free up a couple spots back there? And I'm just saying you can consider it. You don't have to answer it now, but I'm throwing out an alternative. Hey, get rid of the hydrant, and maybe if the connection is on the side of the building, that is a possibility that helps things overall. So I just
Well, we'll
wanted
certainly
to-
look into that. Yes.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you don't have to do that. I'm just throwing it out there.
Okay. Thank you.
The board, any questions, please? Now would be a great time to jump in there.
Sure, I have a couple. As far as the story and the mezzanine, the floor to ceiling height's 11.6 for the first floor, 9 foot 10 inches for the second floor, and then the third floor is 18.4, which splits out to be 9 feet 2 inches if you were to cut it in half. So I'm wondering in actuality, is it basically 4 stories? And I don't know if Madison has a minimum floor to ceiling, and if that would be, at or less than 9 feet 2 inches. or if that is the national code that, it has that standard. So I'm wondering, is it, 3 stories maybe under a technical definition, but 4 stories in more of the spirit of things?
Well, I think 7'6" is the habitable height to make something legal for habitation. So we're above the 7'6", so both all the levels are legal and compliant.
Okay, so if you split the mezzanine and the loft in half, you'd have 9'2", which is well above that 7'6".
Well,
So you'd easily have the space for 2 stories.
Yeah, keep in mind the 18'4" includes the thickness of the roof slab, right? If you see where the tick lines are. And so really you have 17'4" between the floor and the underside of the roof. And then you have roughly a foot of the construction for the floor of the mezzanine. So you go from 17'4" to 16'4" at that point. But we're creating a mezzanine, let's say, of 7'6".
Sure. Okay, and even at 16'4", you split that in half, that's 8.2, which is still over habitable.
Yes, right.
Okay. The other question I had was about the 14 Lincoln side. If you're looking at the sign, sorry, if you're looking at the building to the left.
Yes.
It seems to protrude out from the left a good amount. And I'm wondering, is there a reason that it needs, especially if it's backlit, if it needs to be so visible from the street? And, that's just my opinion and my question. It seems to come out quite far.
Right. No, that's a very good observation. And the reason for that, it actually comes out to the property line. And if you were to look behind that wall, and Shasha, do you go to that other drawing? That's the perspective. Yeah, that one. If you notice, what happens is that there's a little planted area behind the signage. And that planted area is where there are residential units. So we don't want people walking there and looking into people's apartments. So we thought we would put a boundary at that point and just have that as a line of do not go beyond that to create privacy for the residential units.
Okay, so the sign kind of sticks out to where people can't really get past it to go by those residential units.
Exactly right.
Okay.
And I thought it was interesting that you came up with that, call it a model of the ticket booth. What did you call that?
It's a relief. I think probably, I think people are very common, or they see these reliefs it's like half of a sailboat. You ever see that? You see them in people's homes often. You just take like a slice of the front of it and you see the image of it without seeing the pure depth of it. So you understand exactly what it is by seeing the first, so to speak, the first 6 inches of this thing or 8 inches. It would be sort of compressed. So you get the feeling of what the ticket booth actually was by not having to build the entire thing.
Okay, great. Yeah, I didn't understand what that was when I saw it on the plan, but that's very interesting. Kind of like that.
Jeff, the 14 Lincoln Place sign, that is completely underneath the 2nd story overhang?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
So, and Russell, Mr. Stern, are you comfortable so far? Or any further questions you have?
Yeah. I assume we'll get to the issue of the mezzanine later on in the hearing process. But the strict interpretation of the borough's code is that, under the definition of story, that qualifies as a story. Mr. Gertler has addressed his testimony regarding the size of the mezzanine and the other codes that apply, but Madison's code defines a story the way it does regarding the floor and the ceiling above it. So it's classified as a planner. I'm looking at it, and it's classified as a story. And it is, I think it is a critical issue, even though I believe the impact is minor in this case with the small mezzanine levels, but it's very important to look at this as a way almost of measuring intensity of use, because usually some of the elements you utilize to measure the intensity of use is through floor area ratio requirements, density requirements, height of building, and also number of stories. And this is important because the CBD 1 district and the CBD 2 districts do not have floor area ratio maximums or density maximums. So I stand by my position that this is variance that's required.
Okay.
And Joe, I had a couple real quick questions.
Yes, sure, certainly.
If we could, Jeff, if we could go to the, I guess, the solid waste drawing, the last one.
The cellar floor plan?
Basement level and showing
Yes.
the enclosure in the back. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. So the striped area, is that going to be signed as a fire zone, fire lane?
Well, we would like to show that as an area that no vehicles will be parked there, and that no refuse will be put there, and that it's an open area in case of any emergency. And then obviously we could move our refuse through that space freely as well. So
And
yes,
on
it
that
would be
drawing-
striped. Yes, it could be striped. We would like to do that.
I mean, you show it striped. And
Yes.
I guess that area is covered by the easement agreement, and I suppose you could make that a provision of the easement agreement. I know it's not your property.
Mhm.
Yeah,
That's
Mr. Hall,
a
that's,
legal question for Mr. Wolfson.
yeah, that's part of the discussions that we're having with our neighbor on that. So we're
And
working.
and
through all
just
that.
on that, the truck that's shown there, I think somebody was talking about there's a truck back there all the time.
Yeah, we're talking to the neighbor about that and making sure that it's in a position where it's not interfering with anything.
Okay, that's fine. Now, the other thing that came up last meeting, in the corner behind the solid waste dumpster area, there's a square that is labeled as a transformer pad on some of the plans.
Mhm. Correct.
Can you talk to that, Jeff?
Yes, the Madison Electrical Department feels there may be a new transformer put in that location. So they've asked us to provide a pad and leave it empty for the future use. So we're just building them the pad and not doing anything until they want to use it going forward. Right now,
As an
I'm sorry.
architect, if they put a transformer there, there'd be no issues to your knowledge?
no, there shouldn't be. I mean, there's now,
Clearance, setbacks, whatever, okay,
yeah, there's a transformer on the telephone pole to the right of it now, actually.
okay.
Yeah.
That little round thing?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, all right. If we go-
Mr.
the
Hall,
other-
can I
the other thing had
interject,
in the-
Gary?
I'm
I just
sorry,
wanted to follow up on that, Gary, real quick.
sure.
Mr. Gertler, is it your understanding that, or is it your design that you do not need a transformer for this building?
Yeah, well, I'm not a mechanical engineer, an electrical engineer, but as of now, we're not anticipating a transformer.
Do you know if
mean-
loads, any building loads have been reported or given to the electrical utility? And whether it's going to be a single phase or three-phase service to the building?
I mean, honestly, I can't really speak to that. I don't, I mean, let me say it this way, Dennis, we haven't gone to the point with the electrical department to say these are anticipated loads and can you handle them? And I mean, I guess in all likelihood, there will be a transformer for the building. Will it be in this location or in another one? don't know yet, that hasn't been engineered, but we certainly have space. We have that electric room and then the outdoor space as well already, anticipating something like that.
Yeah, to the extent that the Madison Electric Utility wants a transformer, we will work with them to provide one.
Thank you.
I had two more real quick, Mr. Gertler. If you go to the first floor plan, the commercial space.
Okay, the first floor plan.
Yeah, it was in the beginning.
Sure, you're right.
Oh, there it is, right there.
Yes.
The quick question is does the commercial retail space, does it include restrooms? Isn't that standard or no?
Well, we're not showing it now because we don't know whether a tenant, maybe one tenant or two tenants. So we didn't really want to begin to eat up square footage if we don't have to.
Okay,
Certainly.
we could go in there if need be.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, that's fine. The last question, there on the front elevations, there seem to be conflicting views as to balconies on the second floor. Like that one, you just see windows on the second floor. Now there's another one where it shows balconies or terraces. And that seems to show on the floor plans also. I don't know that I care. It's just they're not consistent, I don't think.
I think like if you look at this elevation.
Yeah, that one, yeah.
Yeah. So it's a little hard to see.
There's another one that shows it that way on both sides in the front. This only shows one. It's over there too.
It's hard to, it's in perspective and it's not a highly rendered drawing, but what you're not seeing though is that the walls actually do go back and then turn. So you could see it on that one a little bit more easily. And on the right-hand side, you can actually see the window that's on a slightly different angle. It's mullions. It's a little hard to pick up at this scale. You see that setback in there?
Yeah, there's another view and you can see there's a fence and a barrier on the top.
Or a rail. You mean
it's not a big deal. I just
okay.
Was confused as to what the plan is, and maybe it impacts aesthetics, maybe it doesn't, but.
Well, yes. Well, the plan is to have an outdoor space on those two apartments on the far right and far left there.
Okay, that's fine, if that's what it is. Just didn't look that way on some of the elevations. Okay, that's all I had.
Okay. Are there any further questions from the board?
I had one. Is it possible to give a streetscape from the train platform and or train? It seems like a lot of the visual aspects would be kind of from that. We're talking about mezzanines and lost elevator shaft. Most of that's going to be viewable really from, to me, the train station and the platform. Is it possible to give a view? I mean, I know not tonight, but next meeting or subsequent meeting?
It is. And I must say that we've been, obviously we've been looking at this for a number of years, and I take the train into Manhattan every day. And I've often looked from the station level, to the platform level, to this site. And what's really remarkable, and I think it behooves you to take a look at this also, most parts of the year, the leaves conceal most of the view. Actually, there's not a lot of view from the platform. Now is the best time to see it, actually. And even now you'll see that there are very obscure views through these openings. So we could try and create an image that you'll see, and it's so different whether you're on the right side of the platform, left side of the platform. The center of the platform is where the luggage building is, actually. So you can't even see it head on. It's really the far right and far left. And we'll come up with some images so you could get a feel for what that might be like from there, though.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And the board, if you have time, you could go up on the platform and look across, which I did when I viewed the site a couple times. And when I was standing on the train platform looking across, my eye level was about even with the top of the front facade of the movie theater. So that was about the relative height, at least from where I stood. But you could go look at it yourself. You'll get a sense of it. So, any additional questions, please? Okay, so then I think next we should go into questions from the public. And so Mr. Simon would go first.
Mr. Santoro, I don't really care either way, but I'm looking down and I see that there's 80 participants here for this Zoom session. But to the extent that the chair or the board desire to give an opportunity for other members of the public to ask questions before I ask questions out of courtesy to the public, I have no problem with that. Because
I don't know, I kind of prefer that, you know, in our bylaws that we let the attorneys go first, professionals go first. So I thought maybe that might be a good way to
Yeah,
go.
no, whatever you prefer, I just wanted to throw that out as a courtesy.
No, I'd rather have you go first. So
Okay.
Let's do that.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yep. Can I call you Jeff? Jeff? Is that all right?
Yes,
Right? Okay. I don't want to be too informal, but it's just easier. So
no worries.
thank you for your testimony. You talked about some building codes. Are you familiar with the zoning ordinance and the design standards for the Borough of Madison?
Yes,
And you're aware that this property's in the CBD1 district, correct?
correct.
And you understand that one of the permitted uses, and my understanding is that you're proceeding under the fact that this is considered to be apartments over stores or offices. Is that correct?
Correct.
Right. And multifamily use or apartment buildings are not permitted in the CBD1 district, correct?
Well, I think I guess maybe technically the answer is yes, but I think in all of CBD1, there's many, many apartments. Is that not correct?
I'm asking you the questions, Jeff. Are you aware
Yeah.
of approvals for apartment buildings, exclusively multifamily buildings in the CDB1 zone in the past 25 years?
I don't know. I'd have to really check the code specifically to see. I'm not sure where you're heading with the question.
I'm just asking whether you're.
I'd like to stay focused on the architecture. I think if there's issues about whether it's permitted uses, I could either look up those answers or Mr. Wolfson could jump in on that.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would just note that the premise of the question is inapplicable to what we're doing here. This is not an entirely multifamily building.
Are you aware of what zones permit multifamily inclusionary buildings in Madison?
I would really want to look at the codes to look at it again. You must understand something. I do work in many locations and I cannot memorize 100 different sets of building codes and zoning ordinances. So I look at each one when the time comes up, just to make sure I'm doing it right. So I think right now and Mr. Wilson could jump in, we are in compliance with what we're doing in this application.
When you say, wait a second.
Mr. Chairman.
You say you're in compliance with.
Hold on, everybody stop for a second. Hold on. Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask that Mr. Simon ask the architecture questions, not planning questions.
I am asking him to set a foundation as to what he knows and in terms of his preparation for his testimony, what he reviewed. If he states that he is not familiar with the code, that is fine. That's his answer, and I will move on.
Well, your first two questions dealt with an inapplicable premise to your question because it's not 100% multifamily, and continued with your second question to be strictly a planning question.
These are not planning questions, Mr. Wolfson. These are basis for his testimony that he provided as a professional architect in support of the application. I will go on. I assume so. The answer is that you don't recall what the ordinance says, correct?
You want to repeat the question again, please?
Are you familiar which zones in the Borough of Madison permit multifamily inclusionary development?
I am, and I would look, as I'll repeat what I said before, Mr. Simon. I look at the ordinances for each project I do. I don't memorize them. So I would look the same way I do with the building codes, zoning codes, any other kinds of codes. I look at them. I cannot memorize all of them. So as a professional licensed architect, I do my research and then do my design work afterwards.
And so in preparation for your testimony this evening, you did not review the ordinance, correct?
That's incorrect.
You did review it, okay. And in reviewing it in preparation for your testimony this evening,
Mhm.
You recall then that residential development is allowed in the CDB1 zone only when in conjunction with and above retail or office use, correct?
I would like to look at the code again to verify that.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to renew my objection to the continuing string of planning questions. Our planner would be happy to answer these questions. Mr. Gertler is an architect.
Mr. Wolfson, I'm asking him questions based on his testimony, and he just said he reviewed the ordinance in preparation for his testimony this evening.
I did not do it this evening. This project has been going on for about 3 years. I do not look at it each day of each year. I look at it, I make a conclusion with my other professionals, and we move forward. I would need to go back and review it as intimately as I did at other times, but I did not review it today, if that's your question, but I have reviewed it before today.
When you designed this building, were you aware that the design you came up with required bulk variance relief?
Bulk or use?
Any type of bulk or use variance relief?
Well, is the question bulk variance or use variance, are you asking me, or both?
Are you aware when you designed the building that your design required bulk variance relief?
Not bulk variance, no.
No, okay. So you believe that your design is fully in compliant with the zoning ordinance and the design standards for the borough, correct?
Mr.
That's
Chairman,
correct.
I renew my objection.
I'm trying to figure out why it is that we've already established what the variances are.
Because I want to know if they're demolishing the building and they're building the building from scratch, why it is that they nevertheless require variance relief.
And our planner will tell you that.
No, I want to know from the arch, when the building was, I don't care about the planner right now. We'll get to Mr. Phillips later. I'm asking the architect, when he designed the building, was he aware that the design was in violation of any zoning standard or design standard in the ordinance? A yes or no question.
I'll go back. There are no bulk variances that we're seeking. There's a use variance that we are well aware of.
We are seeking bulk variances, Jeff.
So Mr. Wolfson, let me ask the witness the question, have him answer the question. Is your testimony that you're not aware of any bulk variances associated with the design of your building?
Well, we're in compliance with height and width and setbacks. So I'm not aware of any bulk variances.
Are you aware of any design standards that you're in violation of?
Well, there's a list that we've already put forth that Mr. Wilson has referred to.
Right, and without getting into them, are you aware of any violations at the time you designed the building?
A violation, or do you mean, did I know that?
Variations from the design standards at the time you designed the building?
Yes, we're aware of some of those because there's about, whatever the number is, we were not blind to that.
And with regard to the use aspect, which you talked about earlier, you were aware then that when you designed this building, you were going to be needing a form of use variance relief, correct?
That's correct.
And you certainly could design this building without the need for any use variance relief, right?
Yes.
And if you're demolishing the building, why do you don't need to share a driveway? You could build a new building from scratch and have your own driveway that services this building, correct?
That driveway would be underneath the building that we designed. Is that what you're
No,
inferring?
I'm asking you that if you, because you say you're demolishing the building, that you could redesign this site to be fully in conformance with the zoning standards and the design standards of the Borough of Madison's ordinance and have a driveway to service the building, correct? You could.
There are other projects in Madison that have driveways underneath the buildings and parking garages on the ground floor. I think one thing that we all don't want to do is expose a lot of vehicles and driveways and entrances on Lincoln Place or any other important street in Madison. So the answer is, I don't know why we'd want to be in full compliance and create a very unattractive building and unappealing for the people of Madison. The approach we took would be the most appealing possible way of putting all the cars under the building. We don't see anything except retail space, which we feel is important for Madison.
And did you participate in determining the predominant front yard setback calculation for this project?
Well, the front yard setback is off of Lincoln Place.
Right, correct.
It's where the existing building is. We're putting it where the building is today.
Right. And did you do that calculation to determine what the predominant front yard setback is under the ordinance?
Yes, we looked at actually all the buildings along Lincoln Place. And I think the image that we showed earlier in the presentation, the way each building looked very different. You'll also notice that each building has setbacks that are somewhat different. So I don't know that you could say, I don't know what you would call predominant ultimately.
Well, did you, and maybe I asked it incorrectly and I apologize. Did you take into account the linear length of each of those buildings you compared, you measured to form the this front yard setback?
Well, we looked at all the buildings on Lincoln Place and we saw that many of the buildings were right at the lot line. And the existing building that we're taking down is on the lot line. And we decided we would stay in that same plane because this is part of the urban fabric of downtown Madison. And we thought it was important to maintain a street wall at the lot lines so that as you walk down the street, you can see into the retail stores, unlike the post office, which is set back, for example.
And are there any, and I couldn't tell from the plan, it just might be my mistake. Are there any overhangs that are being proposed on the facade that actually extend into the front yard right away?
There is an overhang, that's correct.
Yeah, and how far does that overhang extend? Is that the 5 feet?
That's correct. In the center only.
Right. So other than the 5 feet that extends into the right of way, is there any other balcony or other marquee or otherwise that extends into the right of way over the sidewalk?
No, that's all. And we thought that would be fantastic because again, if we're trying to encourage people walking on Lincoln Place and shopping on Lincoln Place, we thought having a balcony that might have a canvas on top of it would protect people from the elements and it would encourage more activity and life on the street.
And who dictated the unit count that's being proposed here?
What? I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, who dictated the unit count that is being proposed? So there's 24 units that are being proposed. Who came up with that number?
Well, we worked together, the developers and ourselves. We looked at what would be an ideal number for the property. And we found 24 was a good number for the property.
When you say ideal number, is that the maximum number of units based on your working on this project that you believe that you could get into this site?
Well, we could probably squeeze some more units. We don't need to necessarily make all 2-bedroom units. You could make more 1-bedroom units, but there was a limitation of parking in the cellar level. That was very important to us. So that became one of the drivers.
And so how many, so you showed earlier this evening kind of an aerial of, buildings in the neighborhood and the relative heights. You recall that as part of A1?
Yes.
And how many of those, first of all those buildings that you showed in the are they all in the CBD1 zone?
I don't think so. They're scattered. I'd have to look at the map and see which are in and which are out.
So there's some that are in and some that are out, correct?
Yeah, what was important to us was we're looking at Madison as a community, and we're not trying to draw lines and separating one part of a community from the other. We think they're all valuable, and they all are part of the fabric of downtown Madison.
And from that view, how many of those buildings can you, let me try to word this correctly. How many of those buildings can you actually see from the street level and also see 14 Lincoln Place, your building?
I didn't look at, I couldn't tell you that number.
Right. So, I mean, certainly, I mean, I'm not going to be flying around with a jetpack or use a drone to fly around Madison to look at all these buildings from the view that you showed. So is anything in your packet that's an A1 or anything that you submitted, frankly, Jeff, as part of this application, show the buildings that you can actually see along with or while you're also looking at 14 Lincoln Place? And I know that, you know, Mr. Santoro, the chairman, mentioned earlier about the fact that, you know, it'd be good to see a rendering from the train station across the street, which I agree with, concur with. But is there anything in your packet that you can point to, or the exhibit that you presented, where you can see your proposed building as well as other buildings that you refer to in terms of your height analysis?
There may be in an obscure way, but I'm going to repeat something that I think is very critical. We didn't design the building thinking what is adjacent to the right and what is adjacent to the left, or only what is across the street. The fact of the matter is, I don't know where you live, Mr. Simon, but the house across the street from you, it's hard to see that probably in relation to this, your house, because your eye can't see forward and backwards at the same time. But you do actually look at the house in front of you across the street and recollect what your house looks like, and probably can think, gee, mine is about the same size or the same kind of texture of that house. And you think about your whole block that way. So when we think about Madison, I think, at least in our community, it's only 16,000 plus people. We are very familiar with so many of the streets in Madison, but primarily Main Street and Waverly Place are very powerful images to us. So we look to those streets as drivers for what we think the downtown is. So we don't separate them out.
I've been to Madison many times. And my question to you, being very familiar with the area, and you mentioned earlier, and I think you had a slide as to neighborhood buildings. So what is your definition? So I understand some context here from your A1. What's your definition of the neighborhood?
Well, as I said before, Main Street and Waverly Place are very powerful streets. They probably have the most amount of downtown buildings, and they really constitute the urban fabric of downtown Madison. Other streets have some of the buildings, but mostly those streets.
Right. Okay. And with regard to the other buildings that you looked at on Main Street and Waverly that you referred to in your height analysis, how many, and I'm going to try to say this as artfully as I can, how many of those, of the building roofs that you show, slope away from the street so that when viewing the building's facade, it doesn't look like, you know, the height is coming right up to the building?
I don't know, I didn't study that and analyze it, but I would like to say that we looked at the ordinance in Madison doesn't say that it needs to be one kind of roof or another. In fact, as I read before, it suggests that no two buildings need to look the same, and the building can have its own character. So to compare it to each individual building and say, this building has a particular roof line and that one doesn't, it's really not how we approach the building. We look at the overall texture of downtown Madison.
Okay,
That's
so
the most, it was the most important thing to us.
That's fair. So you didn't compare the facade height of your building to the facade height of any of those other buildings, correct?
Well, we did. We showed you some images of the building across the street, the train station.
Right.
And we looked at the buildings east and west of it. And what we see the buildings to the east of our building is one-story buildings, which we felt is not a comparison that we're going to build a one-story building. The only building to the west of the building that has some apparent height other than one-story buildings is 6 Lincoln Place. And if you notice, we actually matched the height of that building on the front facade. So we actually were in keeping with a contextual relationship with Lincoln Place in consideration of 6 Lincoln Place and the train station in our building. All the others are mostly one-story buildings.
And looking at the measurement that you made on your elevations, it looks to me that if you're looking at the east elevation, let's say from Lincoln Place, that from the bottom of the garage to the top of the parapet, the height looks to me to exceed 50 feet. Is that accurate at that spot? Like if you're looking again, east elevation from Lincoln?
If you're on Lincoln Place and you're looking east or you're looking west?
If you're looking at the building, right, and if you're looking west, that the east elevation from the bottom of the garage to the top of the parapet, that height in that area where you're entering into the garage, that's going to be approximately, if not exceed 50 feet, correct?
It might be that. I'd have to check that.
And also, I know that in my review of the 2020 master plan, that there was a recommendation to provide a 3D renderings of proposed buildings. Have you intended to do that?
Well, we have 3D renderings of those. You actually saw some tonight.
So you consider those as full 3D renderings? Okay.
Well, a three-dimensional perspective rendering is a 3D rendering.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you're thinking about a different kind of perspective rendering, but there are many different views you could have of the building, but these are the ones that we chose because we wanted to look at the building in context to its neighbors.
Right. So you do show, if I recall correctly, a dimensional view from Lincoln Place, from the I'll say from the west looking east, and also from the east looking west. Do you have any rendering, unless I missed it, from behind, from the north?
You mean from Main Street?
Yeah.
We don't have any views from Main Street now.
And I know the height of the post office building, the windows that are facing your building on the post office building, right? So the eastern post office windows, looking east towards yours. What are the heights? What's the height of those windows as compared to the commercial awnings that you're proposing? Are they on the same level?
Well, the post office, if you recall, you walk up about, I'm guessing, 4 steps to the first floor of the post office.
Right.
And so let's say you're going up, say roughly 2 feet there. Those windows are probably at about 30 inches above that point, maybe 36. So now we're at 4.5 or maybe 5 feet off of grade. The post office windows are very large windows. They are, I'm going to take a guess because we've looked at them, I think in the 12-foot range or so. They're very tall windows. So is your question, if you're standing, the sill of the post office window?
So the top of those post office building windows,
right?
Oh,
the top of those are way above the canopy.
They're way above, but by how much?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Approximately.
Well, again, if those windows are about 12 feet and we're starting at the sill is about 4.5 feet, so we're looking at about 16.5 feet. Our canopy is about, I think, at 10 feet or so.
Right.
So it's above that.
Almost 7 feet above. Okay. And in terms of the building that you've designed here, what's the size of the building in total in square feet?
I don't have that number off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Can you estimate for me? I mean, is it over 100,000 square feet?
No, it's not.
Okay. So is it, I mean, can you give me an estimate? Is it 75,000 square feet?
No, it's less than that. And the dimensions of the building are along Lincoln Place, they're about 70 feet, I think. And front to back, we could just ballpark it if you like.
I just want to know, I mean.
Yeah, I'm saying, so 130 times, let's say 70, right? So say it's 9,000 square feet of floor. So you've got 3 floors, 27,000 square feet. It's just a ballpark.
So the total building you believe is 27,000 square feet.
Again, you asked me to ballpark it, so I would have to.
Ballpark, right? Now, and that doesn't include the parking garage floor, correct?
Well, because that's a cellar, so you don't count that. That's correct. It's not a floor.
Right. So, and how many square feet is that? Would that be another 9,000?
It would be the same, yeah, thereabouts.
Mm-hmm. And the 9,000 per floor, does that include the mezzanine on the 3rd floor?
No, the mezzanines, as I showed, they're about 100, let's say 110 square feet each one. And there are, I think, 7 of those. If I got that right, no more. So say it's at the most another 1,000 square feet to the building.
1,000 square feet? Okay, so.
In total, it's a very small amount. It's, and when you think about a house that's 1,000 square feet, you would say, wow, that's not even large enough to live in 1,000 square foot house. So we're talking about all the mezzanines in total being under 1,000 square feet. So I think that's probably good to think about that as a concept, how much additional square footage go into those mezzanines, and think about it in terms of what a house is. A small house is at least 2,000 square feet, right? So we're talking about less than the size of half of a small house. Okay, I'm sorry, please proceed.
Thank you. In terms of your 27,000 square feet, your approximately, what is it, 1750, give or take, of that is the retail?
Yes.
Right? So basically, like, 25 to 250 roughly is the residential, and 1,750 is the retail. Does that sound about right?
That's a ballpark, yeah. Uh-huh.
And if the ground floor, if the entire ground floor was devoted to offices or stores, what's the maximum you could get on that first floor as of right in terms of square footage?
You say as of right, you mean retail or office space?
Yeah, like, in other words, if you had your traditional, first floor stores, and then 2nd and 3rd floor apartments, okay? What would be the maximum square footage as of right on the ground floor?
Well, as we discussed, each floor is about 9,000 square feet.
So that's so. But
I'm sorry, and you need to deduct from that entrances to the residential units above. So you have the lobby, elevator, stairs, etc.
Okay, so how much are we talking about with that?
Just say it's 1,000 square feet.
And when you say it's 9,000 square feet approximately, is what your building is, that's assuming for the moment that, according to your testimony earlier, that there are no variances that are required in connection with the footprint of the building, correct?
I guess that would be correct, if I understand the question.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to enter another objection to the relevance of most of these questions. They have to do with hypotheticals with no follow-up questions that evidence any conclusions, as well as merely asking for calculations on plans that are already on file.
Well, first of all, he didn't provide any calculations, Peter.
Hold on. Wait a second. Mr. Simon, I've been keeping a rough count. You're 50 questions in, and as an individual board member, I'm kind of wondering where this is all going.
I didn't realize, without any disrespect intended, that they're counting questions, but
Well, I'm not necessarily counting, but I'm kind of guessing that it's roughly 50 or so. And my point is that you're asking him to estimate all these figures.
well, I'm asking him
And I'm concerned that the wrong figures get out there and that somehow influences the board. I'd feel more comfortable if the applicant can come back with a table of some of these figures, so we have accurate figures and the board understands the correct figures.
absolutely agree with you, 100%.
Okay, so why don't we let them come back with those dimensions, so we don't, it's getting kind of tedious here.
I
want to keep this moving along.
I
But
understand.
the board has to decide this application, the 7 people, and we've got a lot of this information. And I think it's good that you're asking questions, but it's getting a little tedious here. And I think we could solve half of these dimensional questions by just simply asking for a table to see what the dimensions of each floor are and so on and so forth.
Sure, I do welcome that. And I thank you for that suggestion, Mr. Chairman. Let me go on and let me just proffer, so it's clear that the applicant requires a use variance, and the use variance has to do with basically 2 things. Number one is that the applicant, I apologize, is proposing residential units on the first floor, which are not permitted in the CBD1 zone. So these questions are predominantly going to and toward issues surrounding the use variance. There is a second question, and by the way, not to mention the fact that the applicant, requires site plan approval as well. The other issue here is that, the reason why I led off with a question, not to fool the witness at all, but just to ask him for foundation purposes about the ordinance and what the ordinance states for the CBD1 zone, which is what is permitted is apartments over stores or offices. That's what it states. And when you are proposing, as the plan state, 1,750 square feet of, I'm assuming, store in front, whether it's 1 store or 2 store, you have many, which I'm about to ask him about, units, residential units that are not above stores. And I'm trying to determine from the witness's testimony what we're talking about in terms of magnitude and how that compares to other buildings that he's showing as he believes defines the neighborhood in the borough of Madison. That's where I'm going. So I'm not trying to waste a minute of time. I would love to ask 5 questions instead of whatever the number of questions are.
Well, okay, that's good. That's good. But keep in mind as well that when somebody's constructing a new building, no matter, that's what this board does, is the first question is, why can't you build it without a variance? I mean, it's pretty obvious, but that's where the applicant gets to lay out their arguments, including a planner argument as to the reasons for that.
Right. No,
So we are aware that there are use and bulk variances here. That's pretty obvious, and we've gone through what a lot of those are, and they're enumerated on the table. So we get that.
right.
So
And
let's just try and move things along.
okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, 2 observations. One, the depictions that Jeff gave by way of exhibits were in response to Mr. Stern's request for an analysis of the massing of this proposed building vis-a-vis existing structures around us, not whether those structures would need a use variance today because of the configuration within the building. So again, this line is irrelevant to what the proffer indicated. So we would ask and applaud if relevant questions were asked. in terms of asking for dimensions, the plans are dimensioned. We're proposing those plans. That's what's before the board. So we can't guess at what other dimensions Mr. Simon wants.
I'm not asking you to guess. I don't believe that anywhere on the plan, not that I saw, and I will always apologize when I'm wrong, not if, but when I'm wrong, as to what the square footage is of the building. Haven't seen it.
All you got to do is take out a calculator and do the dimensions and you can figure it out. It's not rocket science.
Mr. Hall, I understand that. However, he has thrown out a number of, in this A1 and the other exhibits that he has filed, other buildings with other height dimensions, and I want to ask him questions about it.
Well, that's fine, but don't ask them to estimate this building when if you pulled out a calculator, you could have the exact numbers. You could ask them numbers, not ask them to guess. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I want to keep this moving along for the sake of everybody. We need to decide this, and I welcome questions, but we can't get bogged down in questions that, at least from my individual viewpoint, I'm wondering whether this is useful for me as one of the decision makers on the board. So let's try and move it along.
So Jeff, you've done no analysis then as to any of the other buildings that you're showing on your exhibits, any of your exhibits, other than as to height, correct?
Well, if you noticed in the deck I showed, we did look at other buildings, facades, windows, massing, other than height.
But you don't have any information as to the square footage of those buildings, correct?
There was no reason for me to determine that. No, I don't.
Do you know how many residential units are in any of those buildings?
Your question again was, do I know the what?
How many? I'm sorry if I.
Oh, I don't know I did not look at other buildings' interiors, if that helps your
It does. Yeah.
question. Okay.
Yep. Okay. And, you know, in terms of and you're not aware of the permitted maximum number of units that could be put in any of those buildings that you showed, right?
I did not research it, but I could figure it out. I don't think there's a reason to figure it out, though.
Mr. Chairman, the question's irrelevant.
That's your opinion, Mr. Wolfson. I completely.
No,
Mr.
Gary.
Stern has already indicated there's no density controls in this zone district.
Wait. What? Who determined that?
There's no, other than the bulk standards, there's not a separate density requirement as to the number of units you can have.
But the bulk standards form what would be the density requirement.
No, it depends how big the units are. There's no density limit in the CBD zone. So it's false to say maximum permitted.
Okay, but
I think Mr. Gertler said that. It depends how big the units are, how many can put in this building. So.
all right, I'm gonna move on. Is there a reason why the amount of square footage devoted to retail space went from 7,700 to 4,500 to now 1,750?
Well, we redesigned the building, and that's what we determined to be the optimum amount of retail space in the building.
And the chairman appropriately talked about conditions from the HPC. I guess that was based on a prior iteration of the plan. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's correct.
And was there any thought in the current iteration of including, I recall that there was at one time a proposal from the developer to include, I guess, 100 or 90 seat public theater, and that was removed?
Yes, that was removed.
Was there any consideration given, to preserving that as part of your current design?
Not in this current design, no.
Is there a reason why?
Well, we had it in another design, and it was not thought favorably, as I recall. We were at it for about 2 years.
If I can clarify, the original application had 2 options for the first floor. The applicant has determined to withdraw one of the options.
With regard to, other than the heights of the buildings that you show in your exhibit, are you aware of the heights of any of the other buildings that are shown but you don't identify?
You mean the buildings that are like 1 and 2 stories?
Yes.
Well, I have a reasonably good eye and understand what a 1-story building might be in height or a 2-story. So we didn't identify those because it wasn't the object.
Okay, so the only ones that you actually, and how did you actually determine those heights? Do you actually measure that? How does that work?
Well, we did a few ways, actually. Bowman Engineering had a surveyor out there. Sometimes we counted bricks. Sometimes we use a little bit of Google Earth. There's a number of ways that we cross-check the numbers. So we're probably within a few inches of being dead on.
And I noticed that some of your, regardless of whether the non-residential is going to be 1 unit or whether it's going to be 2 units, I noticed that in some of the renderings, the awnings say restaurant, and some of the awnings, they say coffee shop and then store. Do you know what the proposal is going to be ultimately?
Well, we show 2 retail stores or possibly 1 on the ground floor, and it'll be determined, I guess, by who comes and wants to rent the space.
Right. Well, is there a possibility that it's going to be rented by a restaurant?
I couldn't tell you.
Okay. And you don't, as the architect, you don't have a position as to whether that would be permitted or not permitted, correct?
You mean by the owner, if they were going to permit it or not?
And I'm just asking because you have
Yeah,
different.
I can't speak. I can't speak for them. No.
That's fair. And where's the? Are you aware for the tenants moving in and moving out? Where is that going to be taking place, if you know?
Well, they could probably either come through Lincoln Place, depending on what they're carrying, or they can come down through the garage down below. There's an elevator going to each of the floors, so they could choose either way to do it, depending on what they're bringing in and maybe what time of day it is.
And what about deliveries for the retail space?
Well, they have doors right on Lincoln Place. I think they would come right to the front door.
And is the basement level going to be used for the retail for any reason?
No, that's the cellar level. And
cellar level, I apologize.
Yeah, it's okay. It's not intended to be for any retail use other than them bringing the garbage to the refuse area in the back. But right now, there are no plans to allocate any space because there is no space to allocate. It's all been really taken up with parking and various mechanical requirements.
Mm-hmm.
And amenity space.
And is there any way that the board could be, talking about the mezzanine for a second, the mezzanines, is there any way that the board can be assured that those will not become bedrooms?
Well, it's a rental building. We're not showing anything enclosed up there. It's totally open. So they have no intention to be a bedroom. Listen, you can't stop someone from sleeping in your bathtub. So it's a question that has no real answer to it, I think.
Okay. Why, and is there a reason why there's only four COA units and not 5 COA units based on the ordinance?
Because that's what is required of us, the 4 COA units, not 5.
Okay, based on the ordinance, you believe?
That's correct.
And was there a reason why 3 of your 4 COA units are on the first floor?
Well, we found those to be some nice sized 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom units on those floors.
Mhm. And I noticed that the 3-bedroom COA unit is next to the dumpster. Is there a reason why it was placed there?
Well, there are actually a lot of different units, both market rate and COA, that are by the rear of the building. And the rear of the building, actually, as you know, it sits a little higher than the front, so it actually commands slightly better views. And it's also nice because of those views. It gets a little bit more light back there.
Mhm. And the fact that the 2-bedroom COA unit, there's one, I guess, next to the lobby, and the other one's next to the retail space, and that's also facing the post office.
Mhm.
Yeah. Mhm. Okay. And then in terms of the size of the COA units, do you show, and Mr. Hall, I apologize if I didn't see it, but a proposed floor plan for the COA units? Because I didn't see one.
Shall we show the first floor? Yeah, we'll show that to you right now, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So here's the first floor, and here's a COA unit, the 3-bedroom COA unit. Why don't we blow that up on the lower right-hand side?
I saw that one, Jeff. I was talking about the 1-bedroom and the 2-bedroom COA units. Have you had?
Well, we didn't design all of the units. We designed a lot of the representative ones.
Mhm.
But the size of the units are really no different than many of the other units. So if you can see the 3-bedroom, it's a very spacious 3-bedroom COA unit. I think anyone would want to rent that, whether it's market rate or COA. Actually, I would love to live in an apartment that size. I didn't when I was growing up, I'll tell you that.
Because it looks like the 2-bedroom COA units are 850 square feet, and the market rate 2-bedrooms are 950 square feet.
No, well, that's the code is 850 for COA units. That's correct.
Mm-hmm. But you don't have to keep them at 850. That's just the minimum, right?
That's correct.
Make them the same size as the market rate units, right?
You could.
And there's no COA units on the 3rd floor with the mezzanines, right?
That's correct.
And with regard to, you mentioned earlier the International Building Code. That's not referenced anywhere in the Borough of Madison ordinance, right?
It abides by the IBC.
Well, is the IBC mentioned anywhere in the ordinance, to your knowledge?
Well, it's the New Jersey Residential International Building Code. That's what. If you don't find anything in the Madison Code about various issues, you must comply with the IBC.
I'm sorry. Is it your opinion then that the zoning ordinance or the site plan ordinance mentions anywhere the IBC?
I'm not aware of it that states it in there.
I'm almost done, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Let me see here. Oh, how much space is there between the columns and the garage?
Could we go to the garage for a second? Because there's some, can you blow that up? So we have approximately, let's say 18 feet would be probably a typical dimension.
Right, like you see between the two columns what I'm talking about, because it seems to be less than 18 feet.
No, each parking stall is 9 feet. It's typical.
Right, but I'm saying if I look at the let's say between 5 and 6, there's 2 columns right on either side, and do those columns, like, what is the width of those columns? Because it seems to me that would result in less than a 9-foot stall on either side.
Well, obviously, as you know, a car is about maybe 6 feet wide, and when it pulls in, the doors are not going to be near those columns. So it should not be an issue for a car to pull in, open up its doors, and people to exit out. It's pretty straightforward. It's very common in buildings that have parking underneath, very common with parking that's underneath buildings, because there are usually columns that are within the parking structure.
Okay, so you're not requesting any relief in connection with those columns, right?
No, we're not.
And where is the, in terms of the handicap space? Oh, there it is. Okay, number 8 is the handicap space. And you stated earlier that each unit's going to be assigned a parking space. What happens if no unit qualifies for a handicap space?
Well, then parking spot 8 would be given to another unit. Are you saying if there are no people who need a handicap space, who would be given spot number 8?
Yeah, I mean, if that's spot number 8 is the handicap spot, the point being is that we have a deficiency of parking and you're proposing 1 space per unit. And what happens if none of the units qualify for a handicap space?
I think we're going to have our traffic engineer hopefully this evening available to answer traffic engineering questions.
Okay, I was just asking in terms of the assignment of space issue. That's Peter. I'll defer it to Mr. Keller, but just to the extent that the architect knew the answer. That's why I asked the question. Okay, and that's it. Thank you, Mr. Santoro.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Okay,
you.
so at this point, we will go to the public for questions. Hold on a minute. Let me grab something I have here. Okay, so we're going to end up going to the public, and I just want to state to the public that this is an opportunity for you to ask questions, okay? So there will be later, after each witness, the public will have an opportunity to ask questions. So this is the first of those opportunities that have come up, but there will be for the engineer and the planner and so forth. And then at the very end of the application, after the presentation, the public will have an opportunity to make a statement either in support or opposition to the application. So really, this is an opportunity for you as a member of the public to ask questions. So kind of dig a little deeper on things that maybe weren't talked about or you want to understand better, that sort of thing. But it's not the forum to say that you hate it, you love it, you want this, you want that. It's really about questions. So I'm asking you to try and stick to that. And so, Michael, are you there with hands raised, that sort of thing?
Yep, we have 2 of them so far.
Okay, so we ask everybody who is going to ask a question. You're going to have to start by identifying yourself. I think we need an address too. And then
Your name and address, correct.
name and address. And then just keep it very polite, please. Thank you very much. And brief, and brief.
Dorothy, you have your hand up if you wish to speak.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, my name is Dorothy O'Brien. I reside at 38 Crestwood Drive in Madison.
What is your question?
Okay, I have a few actually. First, since the architect is still available, you talked about the mezzanine apartments and that was something that residents of Madison are, have been looking for as far as being able to move to smaller, living quarters in town. But what kind of guarantee do we have that they're going to be open specifically to residents of Madison? And I mean, there's only 4 of these primo units that are in the building. I mean, what kind of guarantees do we as residents of Madison have that they're only going to be available to residents of Madison? And frankly, just not just be, rented out directly to the owner of the building's friends and family. That's my first question.
Okay. I don't think I said that the units certainly would be only to Madison people or that we were looking for that. We were talking about tenants in general. And I don't think unless the owners have a different viewpoint, but this is market rate apartments and COA units. And the thought would be is that we're trying to create a very good, with a very good quality apartment that has a good quality of life inherent in it. And we would hope that people who want this kind of living experience, call it, would want to live in this building. Now, we would hope that people in Madison who probably would know about this before other people, they might come first and knock on the door and express interest. That's usually what happens with buildings like this in communities. And we would hope that if there are any retirement age people, I should say, or maybe people just want to downsize, they would find this to be a very good alternative to a downsized apartment in a good quality apartment with great light and air and space and amenities, where they're really hard to find in Madison. So we're trying to provide an alternative for everyone. Really, we didn't really talk about it's only going to be for Madison people, but that's a thought, though.
Okay, yeah, no, I thought I'd heard you mention specifically people in Madison, so that's why I asked that. Okay, so my second question, I listened to the applicant's request for variances back in the meeting in January, at the end of January. And I believe that there was one of the requests for variances was concerning the placement of the parking pillars in the garage. Now, so if your diagram with the parking pillars, is that based on the variance request or not?
Mr. Chairman, if I can speak to that, the testimony was that to the extent that they intruded for a couple of inches, that there was some relief needed and that there was RSIS relief needed, so.
So yeah, there may be a slight request. There might be a request for a minor variance to make that parking work, but I believe there was testimony to the effect that the way cars pull in, it shouldn't impede use of the spot. I believe that was what was said.
I do have concern concerning the parking pillars in general, though, because they assume that the tenants all are going to be pulling into the spots, and which means that all the tenants will have to then back out of the spots, which is not a safe way to pull out of a parking spot.
Well, thank you. Thank you. We're going to continue to evaluate that. So what is your next question?
Okay, concerning the variance request back from the January meeting, one of the variance requests was for the utility meters to all be placed inside of the building in the basement versus outside to code. As a resident of Madison, I am concerned about access to the water and electric meters for the Madison Water and Light Department.
What is your question exactly?
Well, my question is, you have tenants who are going to be the customers of these meters. The tenants don't pay their bills and move out. How is Madison going to recoup that money? Madison is set up based to collect, payment on meters based on, tax liens against the property owners. And if it's tenants who are the owners of these meters and Madison cannot turn off service rapidly because they don't have easy access to the meters because they're inside a locked utility room versus outside the building, how is the utility going to recoup that money and not ultimately be written off, which then increases the rate of Madison Water and Light Utility customers?
How would you answer that, Mr. Wolfson?
I would answer that it's not a question for the architect or any other witness on our team to answer. I assume that they would pursue collection as they would in any other situation where somebody didn't pay their bill, but it's irrelevant to the architect. He's not prepared to answer it. And if you have that question, I would suggest you consider asking the utility.
Okay, so next question. Do you have any further questions? We want to move this along, please.
Yeah. Concerning the driveway entrance into the parking garage, as tenants are moving in and out with moving trucks, I don't see how are the moving trucks going to be able to get in and out of that garage. And assuming that they can't, where are moving trucks going to be parking to move tenants in and out of the building?
But, I think if you look at all the other apartments in downtown Madison, and you look at how vehicles who are moving people in and out, how they operate, I would say they would treat it much the same way. And that is, most buildings in downtown Madison do not have any side entrances or rear entrances. They come right through the front of the building. I would imagine that we would do the same thing with this building, treat this building the same as other buildings in downtown Madison.
But this building is in a space where people need to be able to park rapidly to get access to the post office and to do pickups at the train station. So I have concerns that building that.
Well, I think what we want to do is move to the next question. We are taking that under consideration. We heard this testimony just a short while ago about what they're going to do about moving in and out. So thank you. Another question?
Yeah. The brick color in the composite drawings, you had mentioned, the architect had mentioned earlier that in, an agreement with the request for the Historic Preservation Committee, that the brick color would be reddish, and in all these diagrams, it's brown. What color will the bricks in fact be?
A reddish brown.
So not the color depicted in the drawings?
Well, this is very hard to answer because everyone's screen is different. So I can't answer that. I don't know what your screen is showing.
Tan brown.
Well, it's not tan brown. So that's why I say it's hard to answer this with 80 people on the call with different screens and different pixelations. We can't do that.
Okay, next question, please.
And the first floor apartments, the variance for the first floor apartments, that is based on not the space that was originally planned and promised, to the Historic Preservation Committee, that there would be space for for theater space. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, what is the question? I'm sorry.
When the applicant made their request in front of the Historic Preservation Committee, they had promised that there would be space for a movie theater, a 90-seat movie theater on the first floor level.
But-
The request for variance is now based on, it's requesting variances for first floor apartments. Is that taking up the space that would have been for the theater space?
Well,
That's
Yes, but let me just say that that's not accurate. There is no condition from the HPC currently that there be a movie theater.
All right, I think but it was part of the application. Okay, that's it for my questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next person, please. Do we have another one, Michael?
Yep, Kathy Kakaval.
Hello. Please state your name and your address, please.
Kathleen Cacavalli, 82 Central Avenue. I have 3 questions, which I think are brief. The first one is, I didn't hear the architect comment on how residential tenants on the first floor would be handling their trash. I heard him say that second and third floor had chutes and that the commercial areas would bring their garbage out the front doors, but I didn't hear what happened to first floor tenants.
Yeah, I apologize. It would be the same on the first floor.
Thank you. Number 2, the mechanical area. I heard you testify that it wouldn't be noisy for outside. I just wondered, I'm not familiar with that. So would it be noisy to tenants adjacent to that unit?
Well, I think those walls are going to have a really high performance thermal insulation, probably double layers, and something that we've done before. So we don't think there's going to be a problem now, but that's a good question. Yeah.
Thanks. And the third one is I'm ignorant of what a split unit condenser is. And the statement was made that it would be either gas or electric with a decision to be determined at some future point. And my question, part A is, what is a split unit condenser? And part B is, does that mean that at any point in time, it could be either gas or electric? It isn't just one for its whole life?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll explain. It's really, so it's called a split system. you have something on the roof, which is the condenser, and it's producing a sort of a cold refrigerant line or cold refrigerant medium that's then piped down to fan coil units inside of each apartment unit. The apartment unit has these fans that then, when you have the refrigerant blow over the coils, just like any air conditioner, basically, it produces cold air on the other side of the cold tubes. It's just like your air conditioner inside your wall, but we're splitting between the fan and the part that actually makes the refrigerant itself. Most houses, well, I shouldn't say most houses. So that's what the split system, the part that's making the cold refrigerant medium is on the roof, and the fan system is inside the unit itself. And the other question was, can the units go from electric to gas?
Right.
I'm not sure. I would have to ask a mechanical engineer whether.
Well, actually, the other way.
Or either way, I'm not sure.
Or are they, once the decision is made, that's the way the unit is forever? That was my question, because
I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that.
there are a lot of people in Madison who are looking at the state energy master plan and looking for the town to move towards electrification. And are these condensers also what was referred to as heat pumps in some of the planning documents?
Yes, they would be.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. All
You're
right.
welcome.
So is
Thank
there
you.
any additional questions, Michael?
Well, Lori Reynolds.
Okay, please identify yourself. Let's have your address, please, and then ask your question.
Thank you. This is Lori Reynolds at 29 Academy. Can you hear me okay?
Sure.
Yeah, so Kathy spurred the question of, is there an opportunity for any solar panels or increased energy efficiency?
Right now, we have no plans for solar panels on the roof.
No plans, but do you know if it's angled properly, or is that something you might look into?
We certainly could look into it.
Okay. And then my main question is also about the parking and the driveway and the sidewalk. I don't know if that's all going to be covered somewhere else, or can I ask my question?
Well, what's the nature of the question exactly?
Well, so I understand there's 24 parking spots. At some point, I counted 36 bedrooms. That might have changed a little bit now, but just in my mind, it seems like you need at least a parking spot for each bedroom. Is just one spot per unit something that's typically done, or where else has that been done?
Yes, so our traffic engineer will speak to that, as will our planner.
Okay.
Yeah, some of that, and by the way, some of that has to do with the location of the building next to the train station, so you'll hear about that.
Okay. Yeah, because for instance, if I go to a book club at another condo unit and there are no parking spaces, it's really hazardous for 6 people
Yeah,
to come.
okay.
And
But do you have another question? No,
park and walk.
we need to keep it moving.
Yes, and the other question is about cars passing in a driveway. You know, to say that you're going to be able to know if a car is coming around the corner out of the parking lot seems a little silly.
Yeah,
Right?
as the witness indicated, we have a number of measures that we're going to be presenting to the board on revised exhibits and testimony that will detail all of that.
So my question would be, are there other examples where something like that actually works?
When we
Railroad crossings.
When we present those alternatives, we will present testimony about it.
Okay, so that's what, so I would like to see that. Where is that actually in action? And then I've also lost track. Are there sidewalk variances now or not? Because I walk this sidewalk every day. And I'm very concerned with cars coming out of the driveway, lots of people parked, double parking, people pulling in to run to the post office. That'll be even more hazardous to walk there.
Yeah, we listed the variances at the prior session of the hearing, and our planner will address them again.
Okay, and when did you say that's going to be addressed?
Our planner will address any variances that are necessary.
Are we doing that tonight? Excuse me.
No, probably not, no. So it'll be at a future meeting, I think.
Okay, thanks for your time.
Okay, bye-bye. Is there any other questions?
Holly G.
Holly G. Okay, Holly G, please identify yourself and we'll need your address.
I am at 69 Central Avenue, Madison.
What's your name?
Holly Goodrich.
Okay, what's your question?
My question was about the gas meters. I understand that if they're placed on the outside of the building, that if there's a problem, they can be accessed quickly and individually. If they're on the inside of the building, the gas utility can't do that. They'd have to shut off the entire building. Is that the case? And would you consider moving them to the outside?
If the utility has a problem with the location of the meters, they will advise, but we know from past experience that the meters can be located there.
They can be located where?
Where they're proposed.
Okay, and that it still enables them to shut them off individually.
I don't know that. You could ask the utility.
Well, I would need somebody to ask the utility then, because that's a concern. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, is there any other questions, Michael?
Kathy Kakaval has her hand up again.
Okay, hi.
No, sorry, I didn't. I was trying to lower my hand and I couldn't tell whether lower hand or raise hand meant it was up or down.
Okay.
Right, we'll lower it. Thanks.
Next,
Thank you.
are there any additional questions?
There's no others.
Okay, very good. We're gonna close the public section. So, Mr. Wilson, what did you want to go to next?
I'd like to call Eric Keller as a traffic engineer.
Okay, can we take just a 5-minute break real quick and then we'll do that?
Great. Many of us would appreciate that.
Okay, I'm sorry, I should have done that sooner. I apologize. So, cameras off and mics off for the next 5 minutes. Thank you.
Do we want to turn the shared screen off? So we're done with Jeff for the moment.
Okay, we're gonna get going as soon as everybody's back. Okay. Who do we have? We're just waiting for Rob Simon there. Well, I think we can get going here. It's 5 minutes. So why don't we call your witness and get that started as far as we can tonight, okay?
Thank you, Mr.
And
Chairman.
Mr. Keller was sworn last time, even though he's on a different topic, he's still under oath.
Understood.
Thank you.
Right, and you provided your educational and professional experience both in the area of civil engineering as well as traffic, correct?
I believe I did, yes.
Okay, great. Did you prepare the traffic engineering evaluation submitted to the board dated January 3, 2019 in the addenda dated September 3, 2020 and November 18, 2020?
I did.
Can you please take us through your findings, including required and proposed parking and any traffic flow anticipated from this project?
Certainly, Mr. Wolfson. Our original traffic study, which was prepared for the prior application, but remains applicable to this application. And that was really the reason for that September 3rd, 2020 was to update the development program. There are two components to our traffic engineering evaluation. One relates to the traffic impacts of this project, and the second part was a parking evaluation. I'm going to start tonight on the traffic aspects because they're fairly de minimis and pretty straightforward. We had conducted traffic counts at two intersections, Lincoln Place and Waverly, and Lincoln Place and Prospect Street, during both the weekday AM and PM peak hours and also the Saturday midday period. Those counts were conducted on Thursday, September 7th of 2017 and Saturday, September 9th of 2017. Yes, we have been working on this project that long. At the time that our counts were done, the movie theater had already been closed. So none of that traffic was in any of our counts. We had updated the trip generation and associated traffic analyses, which were summarized in our September 3rd, 2020 memorandum to reflect the current redevelopment program. I will note that the residential component of this redevelopment project has not changed from a numbers point of view. There were 24 units originally, there are still 24 units, and that's what the applicant and what we are proposing. Based on the traffic generated by those 24 units, we performed capacity analyses at those two intersections to assess the impacts on operations, and we found that the change in average delay was nominal. To put this in context, the 24 residential units will generate 8 morning peak hour trips, 11 PM peak hour trips, and 17 trips on a Saturday. And that's in the peak hour. Now, those trip generation rates are based upon the standard data contained in the Institute of Transportation Engineers Trip Generation Manual, 10th edition. As Mr. Maltz, who's the borough's traffic consultant, opined in his review memo, is that was a conservative approach by our office because we did not take credit for the proximity of this development to the Madison train station and to other public transit opportunities in the area. And it's likely that the trip generation for this project would be even less, which means that the impacts to the adjacent intersections would also be less. So really from a traffic perspective, this is a very light use. It has no traffic impacts on the adjacent streets or intersections. Now, the second part of this is parking. The site today, which is a 435 seat or was a 435 seat theater, has no parking. The borough code for movie theaters says that we would need 145 parking spaces for that size of a theater. The theater historically relied upon on-street parking and parking available in the various municipal parking lots that exist within the immediate area of the site. For this proposal, we are providing 1 parking space per unit in the cellar level of this building. If there are no handicapped residents or there is no one who qualifies for a handicapped parking space, because this is resident only parking, that handicap sign would be removed and would be available for a resident. Each unit will get 1 space. Those spaces within the garage on the cellar level will be assigned to a specific unit. If there is a qualified handicapped space that is required, then that resident would be provided with that space. And if there's another resident in there, they would be moved to another space. And that'll all be addressed in the lease documents that the owner will have. So the 1 space per unit for this type of development, given its location, I believe is appropriate. It is not something that is currently found in Madison, but it is found in other communities in the state and in other states. Mr. Maltz had extensive commentary in his review memo about this. The RSIS, the Residential Site Improvement Standards, indicate that we are required to provide 46 spaces. Now, the RSIS also has a provision in there that other alternate parking standards can be applied based upon the specific characteristics of a site, which includes availability of transit, being located in a downtown area, and the availability of municipal parking. All of those provisions exist in this part of Madison adjacent to this site. Mr. Maltz in his review indicated that he recommended that an alternate parking standard be accepted and a de minimis exception be granted. Now, I will also say that the RSIS parking standards include within those numbers half a space per unit for visitor parking. So we have 24 units, 12 parking spaces are set aside for visitor parking. Since the visitors are not allowed to park in the garage, they would have to find parking on the street or in one of the nearby municipal lots. And I'll get to the discussion on that in a little bit. So that would leave 34 parking spaces being required for residents. Which is similar to what Mr. Maltz had indicated about 33 spaces. And if we discount that number, I think we're right where we need to be, and we have other opportunities. And I want to emphasize the fact that, you know, as Mr. Maltz indicated, we're across from the train station. There are, you know, so there's a great availability of mass transit. This is certainly a walkable community. There's opportunities for restaurants, shopping, recreation, all within walking distance of this site. It doesn't mean that this site is going to be suitable or desirable for everybody in you know, who wants to move to this area. But that is the choice of the prospective residents. We do have approximately 1,800 square feet of retail on the ground floor in accordance with the Borough Code at section 195-32.4F subparagraph 5. There is no parking required for the retail space. And, you know, any customer, employee of that will use on-street parking or parking lots, permit parking to patronize these retail spaces, as people for the movie theater did for years and years. So the demand obviously associated with 1,800 square feet of retail is much less than what it would be for a movie theater. But there is available parking in the area. Now, when we prepared our original traffic study, we had done extensive parking occupancy counts at all of the lots in the immediate area. And then we did some supplemental counts at different times of the day and days of the week to get a full picture of the availability of parking in the vicinity of the site. And, you know, unfortunately, when this particular application was being advanced, was right as we, you know, came into this unusual pandemic time, and we have been unable to redo those parking occupancy counts. I mean, we can do them. They're not going to be very representative, and they don't reflect what was occurring back in late 2017 and 2018 when we did the counts. And we think that that data is representative, or is an appropriate means of evaluating the availability of parking. The bottom line is, when we did all of our parking occupancy counts in the nearby parking lots, whether it's Kings Road, Prospect, and so on, we found that there was more than enough available parking in those lots to accommodate visitor parking, retail parking, and should any one of the residents wish to have a second car, they would have an opportunity to be accommodated. We did not look at the on-street parking, but obviously all of the streets, Lincoln Place has on-street parking, Waverly, Prospect, Main Street, there is on-street parking in addition to the municipal lots proximate to this site. So the bottom line, again, is that we believe, and it's my professional opinion, that we are providing an appropriate amount of parking within the building itself for the use by the residents, and that there is adequate and available on-street and municipal lot parking proximate to this site to serve the additional demands that may be generated by this site. The one thing that I want to go back and touch upon, again, I think I covered it last time. I know Mr. Maltz talked about it, is just to talk about the site distance at the site driveway. The site driveway is being improved. Right now, it's about a 15-foot wide driveway. We're making it 20 feet wide so that two cars can comfortably pass. And when a vehicle is exiting the driveway coming up to the sidewalk on Lincoln Place, as is typical in urban environments like this, they are going to do a two-step stop process. One, they're going to stop as they approach the sidewalk to look for pedestrians and observe pedestrians walking along the sidewalk. And secondarily, once they observe that there are no pedestrians in conflict with their movement, they're going to move up and then take a look and make sure that there are no vehicular conflicts that are on Lincoln Place, and then make their maneuver to either make a left or right out of the driveway and onto whatever their destination may be.
And you've already agreed that you're going to you agreed to the installation of pedestrian crossing sign assemblies, etc., right, to also improve the situation on the street?
Yes, Mr. Santoro, there's two existing crosswalks generally in front of the site, in front of the post office. And as Mr. Maltz had recommended, we will provide those pedestrian warning signs at both crosswalks in both directions. Mr. Wolfson, that's my direct testimony.
Yeah.
Unless I've missed anything.
No, I thought it was very thorough. You indicated by looking at the 1,800 square foot of retail that there'd be less than the movie theater requirement under the ordinance, but isn't the total demand for this new building a fraction of that for which the movie theater would have been allocated?
Oh, yes, absolutely. The total parking demand using RSIS is 46. The retail has no requirement. The movie theater requirement was 145. So we've reduced the required parking demand based on the borough code for this site by 99 parking spaces.
Thank you. I have no other questions for Eric.
Mr. Harrington, we have Mr. Maltz's study, and then obviously we just heard from Mr. Keller. Just want to, as a board expert, I just want to ask you whether you think that the way that these two studies were done and the conclusions were done reasonably, in a reasonable fashion.
Yes, I do, Mr. Chairman, particularly with regard to the proximity of the site to available transit, not only the railroad, but we have the bus on Main Street as well. So there is certainly significant public transit available within walking distance to the site.
Okay. Does the board have questions? Any board members?
Yeah. Hey, Joe, it's Tim. Mr. Chairman, I have two quick questions. One, I just want to confirm there was a discussion of alternative municipal parking. Just to confirm, the parking at the train station still is not available overnight. Is that correct?
I don't recall if even if it was available overnight, it would not be available. Permit parking for residents, I don't believe is permitted in that lot. I looked at the with me a second. Overnight residential tenant parking is in the Kings Road lot, the Maple Avenue lot, and the Prospect Street light. This street lot, not light. This is off of the borough's website.
Okay. And then a question that's, I'm curious because I think all of this, the traffic element has to do with all of the adjacent lots, and obviously some of this is being addressed through the easements. What's the reason for the access through the British Home Emporium lot, which I think that might be lot 12? Why is that a one-way? And the reason I ask is I'm just curious because I think, as you sort of increase the drive aisle there and make things more accessible, you may find yourself with more traffic going the wrong way on that one-way there through the British Home Emporium lot.
Well, that's a very good question, Mr. Fitzsimmons. I want to clarify something on our site plans. There are two signs when you come out of the garage that indicate that you can make a right turn only.
Okay.
Our traffic is going to go out to Lincoln Place. What is on lot 11 and lot 10? Lot 11 is the existing residential building behind this proposed lot, and in lot 10 is the British Home Emporium. The driveway through under the building of the British Home Emporium is only wide enough for one lane of traffic. We did some research. We can't find any records of that, but we're not proposing to change that. The angled parking on lot 11 will remain, so that traffic will be able to enter off of Lincoln Place, they leave as they do now, but we will not be adding any traffic to that. There will be no additional traffic going through there because our traffic is going out to Lincoln Place. We also, one other thing, we also, and this was part of our discussions with the neighboring property owners, we also have placed a sign at the bottom of our improved driveway stating that access onto lot 11 is for authorized vehicles only. That was the language that property owner requested.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Other questions from the board?
Yeah, I have another question about I think it might be maybe lot 23 where the mechanical gate was proposed.
Yes.
Is that still being proposed? And the reason I ask is because I think, the driveway is proposed to be fairly narrow. You're going to have cars coming in and out of the parking lot, which even at the same, if there's a car coming in and out at the same time, it seems like it would be close. And I think we were going to see, drawings to that point. But then if you add in the mechanical gate, if there's a car stopped at the mechanical gate waiting for the gate to open, and cars are trying to come out of the parking garage, I'm just not, and as Tim was saying, with possible increased traffic with a new inviting wider lane, I can see that being an issue.
Well, couple things. Good question, Mr. Diono. The mechanical gate will have, again, first off, was requested by the property owner as part of our discussions. And I believe at the last meeting, Peter, we agreed that would be operated. Well, we said that would be by a clicker. Obviously, we need to get feedback, which we've asked for from the property owner. But that would allow that gate to be opened as a vehicle approach. It would not have to get to the gate and then, activate it to go in. It's a single wooden arm, so it's not a slow process. It's much faster than, even a garage door opener. And you have a range of probably 100 feet on those clickers. I do it when I open up the garage door at my house, when I get to enter my driveway. So I don't think that there's going to be, a vehicle stopped waiting for that gate to open. And again, that lot only serves 12 parking spaces. So it's not a lot of activity in and out of there. Also, if a vehicle is, for some reason, the gate fails, and it should have they all have, when they fail in an open position so that you can get in and out. If it, for some reason, locks in a down position, which is highly, highly unlikely. If a vehicle's waiting to get into that lot, it's not going to conflict with somebody coming out of our garage. There's enough separation between our garage entry and the driveway for that lot that the vehicles exiting our garage are not going to conflict with that vehicle waiting there.
Even if the vehicle exiting the garage is making a wider turn because it is fairly narrow and they don't want to clip the side of the opening.
Yes, it's we've looked at this. This is part of my site engineering testimony when we haven't completed all of the things, so we haven't resubmitted plans. But when we resubmit, it'll be clear that a vehicle, even swinging wide, coming out of that garage is not going to would have any conflict with a vehicle entering that parking lot.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions from the board? Okay, so what I would like to do is we're I think reached a logical break point here. And so the next time we pick up on this application, we'll come back to this section here and allow the public and Mr. Simon to ask his questions. Too late for that right now, I'm afraid. And so we should talk about scheduling, Gary, because you and I have been talking about our other applications and we were backlogged and things like that. So and we have another complex application with Elm Street. I was thinking that we allocate some time at the upcoming March 11 regular meeting for this application, if they're willing to do that, to try and keep things moving. And then we could take it from there.
Mr. Chairman, go ahead, you go first. No, you go first. That's fair.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, coming back on the 11th for some portion of the evening to at least complete public questioning of Mr. Keller would be fine. We don't anticipate having completed all our discussions with the neighbors and having made the submission of the exhibits relative to the changes we're working towards at the request of the board and the professionals. But if we could get a chunk of time to make progress, that would be great.
Okay, so but that would be just to finish up the traffic. You wouldn't want to get onto anything new, because I have to figure out how much time I would give you.
Well, we could have our planner testify as well.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, as you recall, I'm sorry, Peter, are you done for now?
I am.
Thank you. So, Mr. Chairman, as I mentioned at the last meeting, I rearranged my schedule to be here tonight. I cannot be here at all on the 11th. As I mentioned last time, I can be here on the 25th. What I would propose, so that the applicant isn't jammed up, is that if obviously to take questions from the public with regard to Mr. Keller's traffic testimony, and then I'm presuming with the plans not being done, that they would have the opportunity to present Mr. Phillips, their planner. And then what I would respectfully request, because I can't be there on the 11th, is that on the 25th, that they would bring Mr. Phillips back, because I will have questions from Mr. Phillips, certainly as the professional planner on the project, and be allowed to ask Mr. Phillips my cross-examination questions of him on the 25th, as well as asking, and frankly, I'm not going to have that many questions of Mr. Keller with regard to traffic. And I'm sure that at the time that Eric comes back to testify as to the revised plans, I would respectfully ask that the few questions I have with regard to traffic and parking, I could probably just cover with Eric at the time, if that would be acceptable. And I think that that would keep the application flowing, doesn't jam up the applicant, and is fair to my client under the circumstances.
Did Mr. Wilson, I don't remember, are you available on the 25th at all?
It may not be me, but to try to delay this process, it would be unacceptable to the client, so we'll figure it out.
All right, so Gary, what I'm thinking is we allocate some time on the 11th. We do Elm Street as well. And then on the 25th, maybe we do the residentials, get going on the residentials.
Either way, it sounds like even the 25th, we're not going to be ready for revised plans.
Yeah.
Mr. Peter?
So they're going to have to come back into April. I
Well,
guess.
we would hope to have the exhibits, because the changes we're making, if you recall, the questions and the suggestions are limited in nature. So we were going to present a series of exhibits for those limited areas that needed to
No,
be
but if
addressed.
you
by
revise the
question.
plans, we need them
Yes.
ahead of time. We don't want to see them at the meeting for the first time. I'm sure
No,
Mr.
the-
Simon doesn't either.
No, we would follow the state mandate of 2 days in advance for sure.
No. These are revised plans. I think we're talking 10. This is not a supplement. This
Well,
is revised
10.
plans, I think. I mean, Mr. Stern, I see you smiling. I mean, you would be the main reviewer, I would think. I mean.
Right, I need at least a week in advance. I need a weekend.
Yeah. So, yeah, 2
Right.
days doesn't.
So why don't we do this? Maybe
I thought Mr. Wilson was kidding when he mentioned 2 days.
Yeah.
No, I was just citing what the law is from the state. I'm not trying to jam you or not allow you reasonable time for it. Again, what we propose to prepare is a series of exhibits for very limited issues. There were some issues about doing some landscaping and moving some of the parking spaces on 22 and 23. There was a suggestion of trying to clean up the back, which we're working towards. We would have an exhibit of that area. Does the board require that the applicant redo all the plans to accommodate those limited areas of attention?
I don't think you have to do them all, whatever is the critical ones, but I think 2 days is inadequate for everyone.
Yeah, I think, so what I'd like to do is at the next meeting, you talked about traffic here, and then also get some testimony in with your planner, right? We're not going to wrap up this application, obviously. And then what we do is we'll converse with Mr. Hall about the 25th. We may choose to put residentials in there. You may do that, in which case, 2 weeks later or whatever it is, you'd be at the next meeting.
Yeah, because we have a pretty full plate with residentials for the next 2 months, actually.
Yeah, and we're having meetings every 2 weeks. So,
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I just want to say that I see that we do have Harold Maltz. And I think at the next meeting, Harold Maltz, I think, would have some questions or would want to address the comments in his professional review.
Okay, we'll do that also.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds
Is
Mr. Santora, is my request, respectful request, acceptable?
Yes, you will have opportunity to question anybody if you weren't there next week. So we're not gonna, you're always gonna get the opportunity to cross-examine witnesses, absolutely. And the public as well will get the opportunity to ask their questions too. So I just want to keep the momentum moving.
Yeah, the board courtesies are appreciated. Thank you very much for that.
And is Mr. Wilson, are you satisfied with all that?
We thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we'll be continued to the 11th of March at 7:30 without further notice.
Right, and we'll decide maybe an hour, I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I want to talk to Mr. Hall about how much time, so maybe that's an hour.
We do have other things and
And we got another complex one we got to hammer out. All right.
Will the scheduling for the following meeting after the 11th be decided at that time?
probably. Because we'll see what we didn't get through and we either do it on the 25th or we're in April.
Yeah, and I don't want to rush Mr. Wilson or give him adequate time to put together his materials and arguments and things like that. But we also need to make sure that our experts have time to review it and give it some thought. They may want to revise their memos as well, depending on what you're submitting, so.
Understood. So we
We're carried to the
appreciate that.
11th for now and we'll go from there.
Okay.
Right, and we appreciate that. That's a great plan, and just want to express our appreciation to the board and its professionals. You're doing double and triple duty these months, and we appreciate the time you're affording us. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'd just like to say that to the extent you need to reach out to our professionals and confer with them as you work through your plans, okay? So they're there to make sure to, if there's aspects that could be handled away from this meeting, that's great. Okay?
Thank you. Thanks very much.
I know.
Good night.
Right.
All right, so all in favor of adjourning?
Okay.
Is there anything else, Gary, by the way?
No, we can do it next time, but let's not forget we have our annual report on the plate somewhere.
Yes, absolutely.
And just a reminder for people to look at that and maybe we can talk about it on the
Yeah.
11th.
At the March 11 meeting, we're going to finalize our annual report, so give that a review, and if there's anything that you want to include in there, you could always send it to Gary ahead of time, or we'll cover it then.
Mr. Santoro, I
Yeah,
just want you to remember that the Novaks are also coming back on March 11th with
Yeah,
their
well-
revised plans.
yes, I know that. I've looked at that pack, and we're gonna have to decide when we're gonna hear them. So right now, the priority, in my view, is this application, and also Elm Street. And then we'll have another meeting on the 25th, and then maybe where we park all the residentials.
And we still have the Main Street one to wrap up, remember?
Oh, yeah, we do have that one.
We
too.
made a lot of headway with that, I think, last week, whenever it was.
Yeah, maybe we'll pop that one in there. So what Gary and I will spend some time discussing that. All right. Everybody's done a great job. It was a good meeting. Thanks, Mr. Simon, for attending today. Appreciate it.
For the opportunity.
And, okay, so all in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, this meeting is adjourned.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good
Good night, all.
Good night.